and to the Iron Islands, he announced. Harlon glanced around the audience as he walked up to the post. He frowned furiously as he took his place. He could hear the mocking tones of the mainlanders. He heard how they mocked him. Mocked the future Lord of Pike and the Iron Islands. Fucking mainland scum. What's the point in trying to civilize the Ironborn if all the mainlanders will do is mock you, despite all you have done to try and convince them that Father wants to change things for the better? But then he remembered. He remembered why it was he had come. To represent House Greyjoy and the Iron Islands. To show the mainlanders, especially the Targaryens, that both he and Father wanted to change the Iron Islands and civilize it. Harlon stood at his place, his Greyjoy embroidered cape hanging from his shoulders as he saw the 3 axes that lay on the table next to where he stood. He grabbed the furthest away axe and took a firm hold of it before he lifted it up and looked at where the target was. It's not as fun if the target isn't moving or is about to throw an axe at you as well, he thought with a grin. Harlon held the axe behind his head before he launched it at the target. He grinned before he launched the axe at the target. He nodded with a laugh as the axe struck the painted wooden man target in the balls. A few clapped at where the axe struck. And a few men, young and middle-aged, groaned at where the axe struck the target. Harlon took the next axe and turned to see Roderick, Baelor, Gorald and Cousin Uthor in attendance. He grinned as he faced them before he threw the axe at the target. Even with his head facing his cousin and his closest friends, Harlon knew where his axe had hit the target. He smirked as he heard steel strike wood. And as the audience applauded, Harlon finally turned to face the target. The heir to Pike and the Iron Islands widened his grin as he saw the axe firmly embedded in the target's head. And now Harlon took the 3rd axe. He was glad that more the audience had clapped and cheered for his successes. If not for whom he was and what he was heir to, but for his skill at the axe throwing. And now, he wanted to prove a point. That he was the best at axe throwing than any other in Harrenhal. He smirked as he pointed at where he wanted his axe to strike. And he lifted the axe up. He grinned as he launched it at the target. Harlon always loved watching an axe fly when thrown. He especially loved it when he was the one whom threw it. It made him feel a thrill at watching the axe fly, thinking it would inflict death in just a few seconds. And sure enough, his axe struck the 2nd axe, still embedded in the skull of the target. And the 3rd axe had split the shaft of the 2nd axe in half. Harlon laughed at how surprised many in the audience were at this display of skill. All whilst Harlon's friends and his cousin rolled their eyes at his boastful showing off. Harlon turned to the Tony Master as he clapped in surprise. 25,000 gold dragons, I believe it is. Baelor too. Baelor climbed onto Brightwind. Gunthor passed him his helm as he tried to make himself comfortable on Brightwind's saddle. And yet in the finest steel plate armor that Coin could purchase from Old Town, he was still uncomfortable. It would be nice if they could make armor that kept you comfortable as well as kept you alive, Baelor thought as he looked across the tourney lists and spotted his opponent. He saw Sir Oswell Went of the Kingsguard take his own lance from his squire. Good luck, brother, said Gunthor. Baelor winked at his brother before he pressed the visor of his helm down. Now jousting in this match is Sir Oswell of House Went of His Grace's Kingsguard. He jousts against Sir Baelor of House Hightower, heir to Old Town, announced the tourney master. As the crowds cheered and clapped, Baelor glanced around. He smiled when he saw his own family who had accompanied him to Harrenhal. He saw his younger brother Garth and their sister, Lyness. Garth had already signed on to the melee, preferring to use swords to lances. And Lyness already had many knights eagerly seeking for her lady's favor or seeking to impress her with their victories. But then he saw her. Baelor felt his heartbeat increase at the mere sight of her. As beautiful and as radiant as he remembered. By the maiden, she is a vision. Baelor's focus shifted when he heard the tourney master speak again. Sir Oswell. Stand ye ready. Sir Oswell raised his lance in reply. And Baelor inhaled and exhaled as the tourney master turned to him. Sir Baelor. Stand ye ready. Baelor lifted high his lance before lowering it again. Baelor looked down at Brightwind, who was digging into the soil with his hoof. Baelor grinned before gently patting the mane of his beloved horse and friend. When we win this tourney, Brightwind, I will give you an entire barrel of apples and carrots. Bright Wind seemed to have understood his thoughts, for he neighed with impatience. Bela chuckled before he sat straight once again. The buglers played a short tune. And Bela yelled out as Bright Wind began to charge. Bela lowered his lance as they approached. He lowered his shield to cover his breastplate. And at the last moment he extended it out. He waited until the last moment to extend his shield out, for holding his shield out and being weighed down by heavy armor was uncomfortable and painful for him. Bela focused on the approaching Kingsguard knight, the sworn brother of great uncle Drold. He was aiming his lance at Bela's breastplate, as he often would. But Bela knew from experience that all knights would look away just before the jousting knights impacted their lances against each other. Bela was different. He wanted to show he was never afraid. He would do so by always keeping his eyes fixed on his opponent. And so, he would never shy from the coming clash. Because of this, Sir Oswyl looked away at the last moment. Just as Bela aimed his lance at Sir Oswyl's helm. And as Bela charged further, he grinned. Whilst he parried Sir Oswyl's lance across, his own lance struck true. Bela remained sat on his horse with the lower half of his lance still in his hand. As he reached the other side, he turned around to see Sir Oswyl had fallen from his horse and landed on the grounds. Bela threw down his shield and what remained of his lance before he climbed down from Bright Wind. He ran to Sir Oswyl, struggling to get himself up. "Sir Oswyl, are you all right?" he asked as he grabbed him by his arm. He groaned in reply. Whilst Bela helped him rise and stand tall. Then he saw his helm. It was a battered mess left from Bela's lance. Whilst the audience clapped and cheered for Bela's show of chivalry, Bela helped him remove his helm. "Are you all right, sir?" he asked. "I am, sir. Just make sure to sleep with one eye open." "What, sir?" asked Bela in surprise. But then Sir Oswyl burst out laughing and patted him on the back before raising his arm up for the crowds to see. At which they cheered more. "Forgive my jesting tongue, Sir Bela. You jousted well and true. Your great uncle would be very proud," he said before they shook hands. "My thanks, Sir Oswyl," replied Bela with a chuckle. Bela returned to the Hightower Pavilion with Gunthor, Garth and Linus. He was glad to be out of his steel plate armor and chainmail. As he dampened himself with a few handfuls of water in his clothes, Bela yawned. "Whenever I get out of my armor, it feels as though I have just rid myself of the weight of the world," he thought as he stretched his arms and legs out. "Brother, have you finished?" Bela turned to see Garth enter the pavilion. "Finished for what?" asked Bela. "Our sister wants to go to the marketplace and purchase something pretty," he explained. Some things never change, he thought. Bela and Gunthor joined both Garth and Linus. And together they walked to the enormous marketplace of Harrenhal. A marketplace that was twice as large as the main marketplace in Old Town. But despite its enormous size, Bela would never be impressed by anything in this dark and awful place. And for the blood of thousands on every brick and mortar in Harrenhal. Walking with them, Bela rolled his eyes when Linus almost ran with excitement at a store selling jewelry. Garth accompanied her, and Gunthor joined, wanting to be a part of it. Bela preferred to not be involved in any of his sister's antics, especially when it involved her love for anything that had a price in gold dragons. But Bela's annoyance with Linus' Unyomania was soon dispelled when he saw her walk on the grounds of the marketplace, giving a few coins to homeless beggars and urchins, whilst beaming brightly at all whom she passed by. "Gods, Elia remains the most beautiful and wonderful woman I have ever known in my life," he thought with a blush as he remembered the last time they had met. What I would do to go back. To when we first met. To win her hand. He frowned as he remembered how she and Oberyn left Old Town for Casterly Rock, with Bela's heart broken in their wake. Bela inhaled deeply before exhaling and walking towards the only woman he had ever truly loved. And the sole reason why he remained unwed. Princess Elia, he nervously called. He felt his heart uplift at how she turned her smiling face from a fruit and vegetable vendor and to him. "Sir Bela," she said. Bela beamed at hearing her saying his name. "Your smile still remains the same since when I last saw you," she teased. Bela looked down at his feet and chuckled before he faced her again. "And yours is still as bright and beautiful, my princess," he replied. He felt a deep blush on his face as well as a quickened pace of his heart at hearing how she giggled. I am glad to see you again, Baylor, she said as she faced him fully, giving him her undivided attention. Nothing more than this could have made Baylor feel as on top of the world as he had felt just looking into her soft and beautiful onyx-colored eyes and her full red lips and her sweet-smelling hair, which made him wish for nothing more than to embrace her and never let go of her. Gods, I love her. Notes. Baylor ulterior motive is revealed. To meet an old flame, one he still holds close to heart. Chapter 21, Meetings, Secret and Not So Secret. Summary. Ned and Ashura begin to court. Whilst Roriger begins to meet with representatives of the lords paramounts of the realm. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Tivette 3. Stood in the hall of 100 hearths, Tivette anxiously watched Jaime. He was stood by Aerys' side, guarding the foul and mad king. He wore armor befitting a proud knight of the Kingsguard. And yet, Tivette saw it on his nephew's face. The fear. And the sadness. This is not your fate, Jaime. I promise I will do all that I can to get you out of this. Myself, your father and your uncles all. This is not the path that the gods have set out for you. You were meant to be Lord of Casterly Rock. And you will be, I swear it. Tivette was beginning to walk back to the Westerland's encampment. He disliked being in Harrenhal. For no matter how great and expansive it was nowhere near as grand nor as magnificent as his beloved home of Casterly Rock. Tivette longed for home. My lord. Tivette turned around to see a servant of House Went approach him. Come, boy. What is it? Tivette asked politely. This letter has arrived for you, my lord. From Casterly Rock, he replied before holding up the letter. Tivette nodded as he took the letter. Thank you, lad. Here you go, he said before passing the boy a silver stag. The boy eyed the silver stag with amazement. On your way now, lad, said Tivette. The boy finally took his leave. Tivette examined the seal. Tywin's instructions for meeting Roriger, Tivette deduced when he looked at the seal of the Roaring Lion sigil of the Lord Lannister of Casterly Rock. He nodded when he recognized the handwriting of his eldest brother. Tivette. The outrage of Aerys cannot be allowed to wreck House Lannister. I will not allow that madman to humiliate and mock House Lannister any more than he already has. You are to meet Roriger as soon as you are able. When you do, inform him that House Lannister shall indeed help him in dealing with his mad father. But make it clear that whilst I have no wish to return to King's Landing as Hand of the King, I want Jaime returned to Casterly Rock as my heir. Burn this letter the moment you have finished reading it. Yours sincerely, Tywin. Tivette glanced around where he was stood. He saw no one who was watching. He turned to the nearest of the many burning hearths in Harrenhal and walked towards it. He thrust the letter into the flames. Once he watched it set alight, he turned back around and resumed leaving the hall of 100 hearths. Last night, during the feast, he had danced with Lady-in-Waiting to Elia Martell, Ashura Dane. During which, she had told him that Roriger would meet with him in the Godswood of Harrenhal. After asking around about the Godswood, he had learned why. It was isolated and though covered 20 acres of land, was outside of Harrenhal. And was the perfect place to host a secret meeting. With Aerys having spies in every corner, nowhere was better than a Godswood to hold a secret meeting, where any unwelcome interlopers would be seen or heard from a mile away, Tivette decided. He walked back to the Westerland's encampment. But on his way, he spotted a knight wearing the armor of the Kingsguard. He recognized it well enough from angrily seeing his nephew wearing it. And he saw the shining and beautiful great sword sheathed at his side. As pale as milk glass and as strong as Valyrian steel. Sir Arthur Dane. The Sword of the Morning. And one of Jaime's favorite heroes. For the short time he is in your company, you better treat him well. Sir Arthur. Tivette called. The Sword of the Morning turned to face Tivette. Sir Tivette. The Crown Prince wishes to speak with you now. Tivette nodded with a frown and gestured to him. Lead the way then, sir. They walked together to the Godswood of Harrenhal. And as they walked together, Tivette glanced around at the many weirwood trees that dotted the landscape. Far more beautiful and larger than the stone garden in Casterly Rock. But that is to be expected, for it is a Godswood inside of a cave and inside the rock itself. Finally, before the heart tree and a beautiful pond, Tiget saw the crown prince of Dragonstone stood. "Sir Tiget of House Lannister, my prince," said Sir Arthur. Tiget waited for no introduction before he stalked towards Rhaegar Targaryen as a lion would stalk towards its prey. "My prince," said Tiget before he made a short bow. "Sir Tiget," anxiously said the prince before he gestured to his Kingsguard to leave. Tiget looked around and saw only Sir Arthur and Oswell went in the area. He recognized the other Kingsguard from the image of a bat carved on his helm. "So, my prince, where shall we begin?" asked Tiget. "Sir Tiget, I first would like to offer my apologies to you and to House Lannister for my father's actions in forcing Sir Jaime into the Kingsguard. I give you my word that I will make every effort to ensure that he is cared for." "Cared for? You are more a fool than you look if you think I would abandon him to this fate that he didn't ask for. It's not me whom must be apologized to. And you are not to blame, my prince." "Quite so, even though it must be done, for my father would never do so." "Indeed. So, where does this leave us, my prince?" "I seek to overthrow my father, Sir Tiget. His rule since Duskendale's terrible sacking has become unstable. Small folk and nobles alike are burnt by wildfire in the throne room. If House Lannister were to lend its assistance in removing him, I would grant your brother his old seat as Hand of the King." Tiget shook his head at that. "My brother has made it clear that he has no wish to be Hand of the King once again, whether to your father or to you, my prince. What he does want is for my nephew, Jaime, to be released from the Kingsguard." "The oaths that the Kingsguard swear are sworn for life," Rhaegar replied. "My prince, you seek to overthrow your father and be crowned king. You are hardly using the laws of the land to do so. I think that you can be excused for using guile and cunning to release an unwilling boy from a position he never wanted in the first place. For he is no willing bodyguard to your father or to your house. He is a hostage. I would never want my beloved nephew in a position of harm, when, as you say, your father is a volatile man who would burn men at the drop of a gauntlet." Rhaegar Targaryen inhaled and exhaled gently at this speech from Tiget. "You can guarantee House Lannister's support and that of your brother?" "I can," he replied with a nod. "Then, upon my father's removal and my coronation, I will release Sir Jaime from the Kingsguard, that he may return to Casterly Rock as heir to House Lannister." Eddard 4. Eddard nervously dressed in his tunic and trousers. His tunic was decorated with a sewn image of a snarling stark direwolf. And he wore a simply grey-colored cloak decorated with the sigil of House Stark. He inhaled and exhaled loudly as he looked at himself in the mirror. "The time is now. I am to meet her. Ashura. No, Ash. Gods, I love just saying her name. And just remembering her beautiful voice. And her sultry voice. Where are my boots?" Eddard wondered aloud. "On your feet." Eddard sighed with annoyance at how Benjen was acting. "Forgive me if this is bothering you, Benny, but I need this to be perfect. I am meeting Ashura again and I do not want to look like a complete fool." "Don't you look like a fool already?" asked Benjen as he rolled his eyes. "Shut up," Eddard snapped anxiously. But then he paused when he saw the midday sun shining directly above the Kingspire Tower. "Gods, I must get going. Now." Looking over himself one final time in the mirror, Eddard exhaled a breath he forgot he was holding in. And then he left. "Ah, is this it, Ned? You are off to court the lovely Ashura?" Eddard frowned as Brandon entered the pavilion with Willam Dustin and Mark Risswell, fresh from drinking and brawling. Eddard reluctantly admitted. "Go on then, Ned. Give her a kiss from me." Brandon boomed before patting him on the back, at which they all boomed with laughter. Eddard eagerly left the pavilion. He smiled when he saw Lyanna sat with Howland Reed. Since she and Robert had rescued him, he was glad that she was caring for him. Though he was aware of her reluctance to wed Robert, he was glad that she was warming to him. Slowly, but surely. "Neddy." He walked towards them to join them. "You are dressed very smartly," Ned commented Howland. Ned replied simply. "I, dressed handsomely to court the fair and beautiful Lady Ashura, aren't you, Neddy?" Lyanna asked teasingly. Eddard grimaced as he looked down at his feet before looking back up at her. He replied solemnly. "You don't have to look as though you are forced into this as I am forced to court Robert Baratheon," she said. "No, sister. I am just being forced into listening to the teasing from you, Benjen and Brandon, Eddard replied. Forgive me, Neddy. You go and have a good time with Ashura. Ignore my teasing. You know that we love you, she said. I know, he replied with a nod. Lyanna rushed to his side and hugged him. Don't worry about the teasing from us. Just have a good time with her, she whispered. Eddard finally left the northern encampment. He walked into the enormous castle and into the marketplace, larger than the Winter City and Winterfell combined. But as he entered the marketplace, he wondered a question that he had not considered before. How will I find her? This place is so huge. But Eddard need not have worried so. For as he wandered Harrenhal's enormous marketplace, he caught sight of a commotion. He looked ahead to see what was going on. And he saw Princess Elia gifting coin to homeless beggars and street urchins, as well as talking to a knight of House Hightower. Ash is a friend to the princess. And she is her lady-in-waiting. So, it stands to reason that if Princess Elia is here, then Ash must be nearby also, Eddard deduced as he looked around Princess Elia's entourage. He saw 2 other ladies accompanying her, as well as 2 knights of the Kingsguard. He recognized them from seeing them joust. They were Sir Barristan Selmy and Prince Lewin Martell. But he could not see Ash. Where is she? Could she have forgotten? Or does she fulfill a task for the princess? Hello, Ned. Eddard instantly turned around at hearing her voice. He turned to see Ash stood before him. Gods, she is so beautiful, he thought as he drank in the glories of her heavenly smile, her face, her eyes and her body. Eddard blushed brightly as he inhaled and exhaled gently, keenly attempting to avoid shyly looking away or embarrassing himself any further than he had done last night. Hello, Ash, he said shyly whilst struggling to look her in the eye. She beamed at him and giggled. Just listening to her giggle made him want to hold her and kiss her. Rhaegar 3. As Tyrion Lannister took his leave, Rhaegar had nodded towards Oswell. He nodded in reply and had left to find Harlon Greyjoy. Arthur kept watch as Rhaegar sat back on the stump a spear's length from the great heart tree stood above the peaceful pool below. Harlon Greyjoy's arrival in Harrenhal came as a surprise. A pleasant surprise, it cannot be said otherwise. But a surprise, nonetheless. And one in which Rhaegar hoped to capitalize on. Harlon Greyjoy is a renowned warrior, this much is true. As renowned as his several brothers. And has a reputation of sailing the summer, sunset, shivering and dawnish seas and taking dozens of pirate vessels. As well as raiding pirate strongholds on the Stepstones and the Basilisk Isles. Though a seafaring man and one who is used to constantly being on edge for a fight and sailing across the seas of the known world, he could make for a useful ally. He is clearly not like his own ruthless and daring ancestors such as Dalton Greyjoy or Dagon Greyjoy. Or even like the tyrant who built Harrenhal in all its dark and gloomy grandeur. But what will he and his father want? His father is a good man, clearly. A man who led the Iron Fleet to help fight against the Black Fires at the Stepstones and led the destruction of Maelys Blackfyr's fleet and slew Samaro Sauron at the Battle of Grey Gallows. I will need to hear him out on what he and his family want. The Iron Islands will be useful in my reign. If Harlon Greyjoy proves to be a useful ally, he can use the Iron Fleet to end the pirates of the Stepstones for good, as well as the sea raiders of the Three Sisters. Yes, the Iron Islands would be very useful indeed. Rhaegar now stood before the heart tree, trying to calm himself from his restless thoughts. As well as choosing the godswood to meet for the seclusion and the chance of spotting any spy sent by father, it reminded him of the Witch of Summerhall. She whom showed him of the old gods. She whom showed him the prophecy. She whom told him of the true enemy. She whom opened his eyes to the truth of the long night. She whom told him of the prince that was promised. But his thoughts towards the imminent crisis were interrupted by the sounds of twigs and leaves rustling and cracking underfoot. He turned to see Oswell arrived with Harlon Greyjoy. The man whose presence was unexpected but welcomed. Lord Harlon of House Greyjoy, my prince, he said. Thank you, Sir Oswell. As he left, Rhaegar studied the heir to the Iron Islands. A tall and foreboding man was the eldest son of Quarian Greyjoy, the old Kraken. His long and dark hair reached down to his shoulders, whilst his beard reached down to the middle of his neck. His arms and legs were thick with muscle. and he wore black and gold leathers over his chainmail, as though on constant readiness for battle. Ever since he saw him first arrive in Harrenhal, he had not seen the heir to the Iron Islands wear anything other than armor. Though he did not carry his weapons on his belt, Roriger spotted the outline of a sheathed dagger tucked under his sleeve. "Prince Roriger," he said gruffly with a bow. "Lord Harlon." "Please," replied Roriger, gesturing to the 2 stumps by the pool of the heart tree. "If it please you, I prefer standing," he replied. Roriger nodded and walked by the pool. Standing by the stump he liked to sit down on, whilst the Greyjoy stood with his arms crossed, his large and thick arms wrapped in chainmail and black boiled leathers. "Lord Harlon, I would know of what your father intends for the Iron Islands," he asked. He raised a brow at that before his arms fell to his sides. "You show interest in the Iron Islands, Prince Roriger?" he asked. "I show an interest in all kingdoms of Westeros," replied Roriger. "And yet, no king nor crown prince before you have. The only times when a Targaryen shows interest in the Iron Islands and my people is in times of war. When Greens and Blacks both called for Dalton Greyjoy to fight for them in the Dance of the Dragons. And more recently, when Maelys the Monstrous established himself on the Stepstones, father was one of the first whom King Jaehaerys sent letters to, asking for help." "You are well read on your history, Lord Harlon." He said simply and with a nod. "Though the future Lord of the Iron Islands, there can be no doubt that he is a hardened warrior and sailor. He might not be an equal to Arthur or Barristan, but he is certainly a capable warrior. What is it that you want for the Iron Islands, Lord Harlon?" That question surprised him. "What do you mean, Prince?" he asked. "There is no hidden meaning behind my question, my lord, I can assure you," he replied earnestly. "Convinced," Harlon Greyjoy replied. "My lord father wants to change things for the Iron Islands. Though there are many who would seek to follow the old way, as my ancestors had done, and more recently, like my great-grandfather Dagon, neither father nor I want such a thing," he replied. "And what do you both want?" "To bring about a new way of life for the Ironborn. The Iron Islands do not possess fertile farmlands like the Reach, hills brimming with gold and silver like the Westerlands, or bountiful and fresh rivers brimming with fish like the Riverlands. For these reasons, it is why the Ironborn have survived on raiding and reaving. But father and I wish to bring civilized ways of life to the Iron Islands, which do not come at the expense of the lives or livelihoods of innocent small folk of foreign nations." "So, you would wish to end the ancient way of life of the Iron Islands and replace them with lawful livelihoods for the Iron Islands to live by? That you might still use your seafaring traditions, but in lawful ways? And to provide for the Iron Islands?" asked Roriger. "Aye. That we do. If it is possible," he replied. Roriger believed him. After years of living in King's Landing and enduring the conniving lickspittles and ambitious players of the Game of Thrones, he could tell when a man was lying to him. And he was in no doubt that Harlon Greyjoy was not a liar. He was refreshingly honest and straightforward. "I can provide this for you and for your people, Lord Harlon," said Roriger. He raised both brows and placed both hands on his hips. "Aye. And how? If House Greyjoy and the Iron Islands were to side with me, I can provide land charters for the Iron Islands to build trading posts across the 7 kingdoms, that merchant captains of the Iron Islands might come and trade local goods with goods obtained from far abroad. All to provide a lawful livelihood for your seafaring subjects and to provide resources to the Iron Islands, without needing to resort to paying for them with the iron price." Notes. Where will it go with Roriger and his plots with the Lannisters and the Greyjoys? How will it affect the latter 2 families? Chapter 22, The Plot Thickens. Summary. Roriger continues to plot and now turns to the Baratheons, Starks, Tullys and Arryns. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Elia 3. Sat in the bedchambers she shared with Roriger, Elia quietly drank water from her cup whilst Jon sat down. He averted his eyes from Elia, instead facing Roriger, as he always did. Ash would be doing the same if she was present. Alas, she was absent, spending time with her dear Ned. Elia was happy for Ash that she was spending so much of her spare time with Ned. It had been a long day for all of them across Harrenhal. Whilst Elia had been showing up at the various games of the tourney and touring the marketplace and meeting the small folk and merchants, as well as reuniting with Baelor, she had also met Oberyn, whilst Jon had met with Mace Tyrell and Rhaegar had met with Tyrell Lannister and Harlon Greyjoy. "Now that we are all here, what news have we?" "Jon," asked Rhaegar as he drank from a cup of wine. "Mace Tyrell will gladly back our efforts," Rhaegar Jon said eagerly. "Good. A good thing his mother wasn't present in the meeting, if what Rhaegar's stories of the Queen of Thorns are true." Rhaegar nodded with a smile before he turned to Elia. "As will Dorne. Oberyn told me that Doran will be glad to put Dorne's backing behind us," she replied, proud of her family and her homeland. "What of your meeting with Tyrell Lannister, Rhaegar?" asked Jon. Rhaegar cleared his throat before putting his cup down on the nearby side table. "He says that the Lannisters will indeed back us, so long as Jaime is released from the Kingsguard," he explained. "What of the offer of being Hand of the King?" asked Elia. "He claimed that Tywin Lannister did not want it," he replied. "That is a surprise. Though not of Sir Jaime to be released from the Kingsguard. He is much too young to be in it. He clearly had no choice in the matter. Also that Aerys could mock Tywin Lannister." "And what of the Greyjoys, Rhaegar?" asked Elia. Rhaegar hummed as he interlocked his fingers together. "They will back us." But Harlon Greyjoy wanted to make it clear that both he and his father wished to reform the Iron Islands and civilize their people, effectively turn them from a life of piracy to a civilized life. "And you believe him?" asked Jon. "I do," he replied with a nod. "So, that brings half of Westeros on our side. Dorne, the Iron Islands, the Reach and the Westerlands. Now, we need to bring in the North, the Riverlands, the Stormlands and the Vale," said Elia. At the mention of the Stormlands, Jon frowned. And Elia didn't need to ask why that was. "I have talked with various Stormlords and their heirs," said Jon. "But have you spoken with Robert Baratheon, the Lord of Storm's End?" asked Elia. He frowned as he shook his head whilst mouthing the word no. "He will need to be approached if we are to have all of the Stormlands on side," said Rhaegar. "In spite of the fact that he has made it no secret of how much he dislikes House Targaryen?" asked Elia. Rhaegar turned puzzlingly to her. "It is true, Rhaegar. He blames your father for the deaths of his parents," said Jon. "Well, how can he not? When they died trying to find you a pure Valyrian bride on Aerys' behalf." "Jon, can you speak with him?" Jon frowned at that. "Perhaps I can meet with him. Given the lack of cordiality between the two of you," Elia offered Jon. Jon's eyes lit up and he looked positively brimming at this compromise. Until Rhaegar spoke. "No. Jon, you will not hide from my cousin. Though you may despise the man, he is the Lord Paramount of the Stormlands and shall be a valued asset come the day I am sat on the Iron Throne," said Rhaegar. "Yes," Rhaegar replied Jon with a reluctant grimace. "That leaves out Jon Arryn, Hoster Tully and Brandon Stark," said Elia. "I shall have Arthur and Oswell reach out to the former two tomorrow and I will meet them in the Godswood to hear them out and make my offer to them," said Rhaegar. "And what of Brandon Stark?" asked Jon. At that, Rhaegar turned to Elia. "I gather that Arthur's sister Courtsa Stark?" he asked. "Yes, Brandon's brother Eddard," she replied. "Have her deliver a message tomorrow to the elder Stark. I will meet with him either tomorrow or the day after. And God's willing, we will have all the support of all main families of the Lords Paramount upon this week's end," said Rhaegar. Ashura 4. Sat up on her bed, Ashura beamed as she finally stood up and walked to her wardrobe. She picked out a grey and white dress and quickly put it on. She thought back to the braid that his sister wore at the feast that night. It was a braid unfamiliar to her. And so, Ashura concluded that it had to be a northern braid. It was 20 minutes before she stood in front of the mirror. Dressed in a dress that was colored in the colors of House Stark. And wore her hair styled in a northern braid. Ashura felt her heart flutter as she thought of him and impressing him in this way. "How is it that I feel this way about him? We have only known each other for a few days. And yet, he is all I can think about. Before this, I resigned myself to feeling refusal to believe in love or marriage. But now, he just makes me feel like a love-struck little lady once again. More so than I have ever felt before." Ashura inhaled and exhaled before she walked to the door. She left her quarters in the Kingspire Tower before making her way down to the Hall of 100 Hearths. She soon spotted Elia, Miria and Lara eating breakfast. But before she could walk in their direction, she saw Arthur. stood in the armor of the king's guard. Arthur gestured to her to come to him. She walked towards him, where she saw him glancing around. "Are you well this morning, sister?" he asked. "I am, brother." "What of you?" she wondered. "I am well. Though I am surprised to see you so happy." Ashura raised a brow at that. "Can I not be happy, brother? Gods know that father denied me that chance when mother died, claiming I spent too much time with those Roanish whores." "Of course you can, Ash. Do not mistake me. It is only because I haven't seen you as happy as this in a long time," he explained. "That is because I am simply happy," she replied. "So happy that you wear a different colored dress to what you usually wear, and you have your hair braided in an unfamiliar way," he asked before she could even step towards Elia's table. "And what concern is this of yours?" "I am courting someone, Arthur." His eyes narrowed at that. "Whom is he?" he asked. "His name is Eddard Stark, the second son of Lord Ricard," she replied. He raised his brows at that. "Well, at least he is not the skirt-chasing eldest son Brandon, who is already betrothed to the eldest daughter of Hoster Tully. And what is there to know about Eddard? He is gentle, honorable and kind. Though he was one of the shyest young men I have ever met, he has shown me what a good man he is, and he has not once tried to seduce me into bed with him," she said. Arthur could only hum at her explanation. "And you learned all of this from just a few days of courtship, Ash?" he asked. "From all my years at court in the Red Keep, I am quick at studying men and women, Arthur. Whilst you guard our king and not our queen, I do what I can for Elia, for Rhaenys and for the day that Rhaegar and Elia are crowned king and queen," she replied. Arthur frowned at how she described his duties. "Sister, that was unkind." "But true," she replied with a frown. He frowned and closed his eyes as he exhaled before opening them again. "Perhaps so. But our oaths are ironclad," he said. "I thank you for being so protective, brother. But Eddard is not a bad man. He is nothing like his brother, nor any man you are likely to find in King's Landing," she said defensively. Ashura reached up and patted his shoulder before reaching up and kissing his cheek. "I love you, brother, for thinking of me. And I can assure you that I will be fine. I promise," she said. He smiled and nodded. "I know, sister." Ashura left his company before walking to Elia's table for breakfast. She sat down and began to eat breakfast with them. "So, what happens today?" she asked. "Plenty shall happen today," replied Elia before she leant in and began to whisper discreetly to her, before she gestured to Miria and Lara, who began to giggle on cue. "Rhaegar meets Hoster Tully and Jon Arryn today. John Connington will meet with Robert Baratheon. But we need you to deliver a message to Brandon Stark." "To meet with Rhaegar?" asked Ashura. Elia nodded. "Gods. In all the time I have been courting with Ned, I have not once thought of Aerys, of Rhaegar, of Elia or of the plot to remove Aerys from the Iron Throne. All I have been able to think about is Ned. Me and Ned together." Brynden 3. Hoster's nephew, Oswell, escorted them to the Godswood. "The Heart Tree, Uncle Hoster. The Crown Prince will meet you both here momentarily," he said, pointing at the tree in question. It was a beautiful tree, Brynden noticed. But not as beautiful as the great heart trees that could be seen from the beaches of the God's Eye that dotted the landscape of the Isle of Faces. "Thank you," Oswell said Hoster before he stood next to the heart tree. Brynden stood next to him. Though both worshipped the Seven and had done so for their entire lives, they respected the old gods, having been raised with the Godswood in Riverrun and because of the minority of worshippers of the old gods in the Riverlands, most notably House Blackwood of Raventree Hall. Oswell stood a stone's throw away. Whilst Brynden thought about what Rhaegar Targaryen would say to them. "There can be only one reason as to why he invited us here. After seeing the king in person, the hushed stories and rumors from the capital are true. And that he is a madman. The conclusion one can draw from this is that Aerys is a man most unsuited to be our king. But what of Rhaegar? Rhaenyra, the realm's delight, was indeed the rightful heir to Viserys Targaryen, and yet she knew not how to rule. And her last husband, her own uncle, was a volatile and dangerous man, most unsuited to be king. What sort of man is the last dragon? Our crown prince. Will he be a salvation for the realm from his father's madness? Or will he be his own man? His own brand of madman. What are you thinking, brother? Brindon whispered as Hoster looked upon the heart tree and stroked the carven face on the heart tree. Hoster inhaled the peaceful air before exhaling and taking his hand away from the carven face. I think that the Crown Prince needs us as much as we need him, he explained. But can this be to our benefit? Asked Brindon. Hoster raised a brow and turned to him. What do you mean? The Riverlands is divided between those who are more inclined to blindly follow King's Landing, such as the Diaries and Mutongs, and those who are loyal to the Lord Paramountcy. Hoster pursed his lips in thought. But their heads turned upon hearing leaves crunching underfoot and twigs snapping. Brindon and Hoster both turned to see a man dressed in black and a knight wearing the armor of the King's Guard. The man dressed in black removed his hood, revealing his silver-blonde Valyrian hair and his piercing violet eyes. The last dragon, Brindon thought with a raised brow. Brindon had heard plenty of Rhaegar Targaryen. That he was a highly skilled knight, second to Aemon the Dragon Knight himself. That he was as educated and well-read as the Archmaester of the Citadel. That he was as skilled a musician as a band of troubadours and minstrels. And, most of all, that he was the realm's last hope from Aes Madness. Remember what we discussed, Brother Brindon whispered as he turned around and had his back turned to the Crown Prince and his guard. I know full well what this shall be about, Brindon Hoster replied. Good. Then you will not behave as greedily as Walder Free, Brindon replied with optimism. Greed. This is more than some petty greed for advancement and power, brother. Don't you see that? Hoster asked impatiently. What I see is a chance for the realm to change, but I do not want that at the expense of House Tully or all that our forebears have achieved. This caught Hoster's attention. Brindon was glad to see. Of what do you mean? Asked Hoster. What I mean is that we should hear out what the Crown Prince has to say. Be diplomatic, but not greedy. And agree to what he proposes, only if it is feasible. But we do not make any demands of him. Not until anything is set in stone, Brindon advised. At last, Hoster saw sense and nodded. Brindon turned back around and faced the Crown Prince, whilst both his guards, Oswell and Sir Arthur Dane, began to patrol around. My prince, they said together and bowed their heads. My Lord Tully. Sir Brindon, he greeted. I apologize for taking you away from your family, Lord Tully, but I had need to speak with you, in such a way that none could draw nefarious conclusions, he said. Hoster nodded as Brindon turned to his brother. From what I've seen of our king, my prince, you have taken a great risk in inviting us here and meeting with us, Hoster said diplomatically. Well said, brother. Now, let us see what he has to say for himself. I have, my lord. And the circumstances are dire, as you may have already deduced, he said. Go on, my prince, said Brindon. Simply put, I know full well what is whispered across the realm of my father's mental state. And the stories are no exaggerations. By the day, he becomes more unstable and more paranoid, seeing enemies in every corner. I would not let this continue. I would have this end, before things become worse, said the Crown Prince. Noble goals, my prince, said Hoster. It is only what must be done, my lord. For the realm, that none might suffer from the yoke of my father's cruelty, he said. Brindon noticed how he said it. He said it with such conviction, that none would be unconvinced by him. Perhaps I was wrong to doubt him. And what would you have of House Tully, my prince? Asked Brindon. At that, the Crown Prince exhaled gently before he made reply. For now, nothing. Nothing, asked Hoster. For now, at least, my lord. But when the time comes to act, I will send word to all lords paramount. And my father shall be quietly overthrown, he explained. Will you back me, my Lord Tully? Brindon turned to Hoster. He nodded with a small smile. I shall, my prince, he said before offering his hand. The Crown Prince shook his hand and took his leave. When do you think the time shall be right, my prince? Asked Brindon. I hope, near the end of the tourney's conclusion, Sir Brindon, he replied. Notes. Connington now must meet his hated rival, Robert. Poor Robert. And Brindon manages to convince his brother to not behave as greedily as Walder Free. Chapter 23, All the world's a stage, and all the men and women merely players. Summary. Ned and Ashura continue to court. Meanwhile, Robert manages to stop himself from breaking every bone in Connington's body. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Robert III. A raven just came, from Storm's End, brother, said Robert. Stannis looked up from his book. Renly, he asked dully. Yes. He says that he is excited for us all to be back in Storm's End and for us to be a family again, replied Robert. But saying that aloud, Robert felt a sadness. He remembered the last time when his family was whole. It was when he was a boy of 4 and 10 and he had come home at Storm's End for the first time since he was 9. He had come home to celebrate the birth of Renly. And in a feast, father told Robert, your mother and I go to Volantis soon, Robert. My cousin, the king, has directed me to find a pure Valyrian bride for your cousin, Crown Prince Rhaegar. Once I do, I will gain a high place in court, perhaps in the small council. And perhaps a place in the Kingsguard can be provided for Renly in the future. And be the first Baratheon in the Kingsguard since Raymond Baratheon. That was the last time Robert had seen mother and father. For the next year, he had received the news that their ship, the Wind Proud, smashed onto the rocks of Shipbreaker Bay. From the day he received the letter from Maester Cresson, Robert felt nothing but a loathing towards House Targaryen. His cousins, whom did nothing but write a letter of apologies to him for his loss. Robert passed the letter to Stannis before he sat down. He was about to reach for a cup of wine. Until he heard the flap of his tent move. He looked up to see Artyom walk inside. My lord, Lord John of House Connington wants to see you. That ginger prick. Why the fuck is here? Robert's hands curled into fists as he wanted nothing more than to batter the bastard into oblivion for all the insults he directed at him. Robert felt nothing but hatred for him ever since the funeral held at Storm's End for mother and father. He had overheard him, the heir to Griffin's Roost, talk amongst his own friends of being a squire alongside Rhaegar. And then he had said the pathetic Baratheon boys. They weep and moan. They should be honored that their parents died doing their duty to House Targaryen, in trying to find a perfect bride for the crown prince. Robert, in a fury, challenged John Connington. Connington's father, Lord Ormond, claimed that he was drunk and meant no insult. Robert refused to listen to him and beaten him bloody for all insults directed at House Baratheon before he was dragged back by Uncle Harbert and Sir Courtenay. Clear the pavilion, he reluctantly ordered Stannis. He nodded obediently and cleared out of there with Artyom. And once the only one remaining inside was Robert, his hated rival finally entered, looking every bit as smug and shit-headed as Robert remembered. Fucking ginger retard. Go and suck Rhaegar's cock for all the good it will do. Robert, he said. Robert glared up at him. Even though he was sat down, he was still level with the Lord of Griffin's Roost. It's Lord Baratheon to you, he snapped. Ginger cunt. Think Rhaegar will award you the Lord Paramountcy of the Stormlands if you kick his boots and suck his cock long enough. Robert finally stood up when he remained silent. Connington snarled in anger as he glanced up at Robert, and saw him flexing his muscles, as though ready to pounce and attack. My Lord Baratheon. I would have words, he said. And I would sooner smash my hammer into your balls. But we can't always get what we want, can we? Not like you can't have Rhaegar all to yourself, can you? Then let us talk, Robert snapped with a hand gesture and a frown directed at him. You have seen clearly the state of our king these past few days. It is evident that he is unsuited to stewardship and cannot be trusted to rule as king. And what? My cousin is better suited to be king. I have heard plenty of him. That he spends more time in libraries and studying old books and ancient scrolls, desperately believing in prophecies written by dead men thousands of years ago. Robert already knew what John Connington was up to. He had heard plenty of it from cousin Eamon Estermont, Ballion Morrigan and Ralph Buckler. Robert knew well that John Connington was doing all he could to avoid speaking to Robert by meeting all Stormlords in attendance, trying to gain their support for Rhaegar. And even boasting that Rhaegar might reward the most loyal Stormlords with advancement when he was king. And where does House Baratheon and the Stormlands come into this? Robert asked with a raised brow. A great deal. You are related to the Crown Prince by your grandmother. You are his cousin. And so, by honor, You are bound to support him in removing his volatile and dangerous father from the Iron Throne, he replied condescendingly. Robert rolled his eyes at him. He grinned at the reaction that came from Connington. He snarled with anger as he glared up at Robert. You insult me, Robert, he demanded. Yes. Got a problem with that, Johnny boy, he asked. He frowned at what he just called him. Why does the Crown Prince not meet with me himself, asked Robert. He has no obligation to meet with you directly. He has far more important duties to take care of, he replied smartly and with a sneering smirk. Oh, and meeting his own cousin is not considered important. His cousin who is now Lord Paramount of the Stormlands. Well, doesn't that just make me feel honored? Especially when addressed by his own cocksucking lickspittle. What did you just call me? Connington demanded. Robert shook his head. You heard me. You know what I said. Now, tell Roriger that he will have my support. Go on, you ginger prick. Go and lick his boots, whilst knowing that he will never feel the same about you, Robert snapped. Connington shook his head in a fury. Which only amused Robert. It's a pity you weren't aboard that ship with your idiot father and your whore mother. Stannis would have been better off as Lord of Storm's End than you. Maybe one day, I might be able to arrange that. He turned and left the pavilion. Whilst Robert resisted the urge to run to him and knee him in the back and break his spine. You fucking cunt. Eddard v. Eddard felt a slight sweat coming from his hair and onto his forehead and his neck. He reached up with both hands and smoothed his hair with the sweat. And as he approached her, he inhaled gently and exhaled as he straightened the collar of his doublet before unnecessarily touching the clasps of his cape. Gods, she is a heaven-sent star. She is a gift from the old gods to me. One that I have never done anything to deserve her. Whenever I am near her, I feel as though I am dreaming. Eddard smiled as she approached her, as she had her back turned to him, looking around Harrenhal's enormous stables. The stables which, to Eddard's eye, looked large enough to house over 1,000 horses. A Dothraki horde could safely leave all their horses here whilst their blood riders feasted and drank all around the castle. Ash, he called nervously. But his voice was so hindered by his nerves, that she had not heard him. Ash, he called again, his voice louder this time. And this time, she had heard him. Ash turned around, whilst he smiled joyfully, a smile he had been cueing on her turning to him. She beamed at seeing him. Hello, Ned, she said as she extended her hand out. Eddard exhaled a breath he had no idea he was holding in as he took hold of her hand and kissed it. How are you, she asked sweetly. On top of the world from just seeing you. I am all the better for seeing you, Eddard replied. Ash blushed at hearing that. Then she leant in and kissed him on the cheek. At feeling her lips on his cheek, Eddard stopped. He felt as though he couldn't move, couldn't speak or even think. Ned, she asked with a teasing grin. Ash, he replied finally. My whole body feels as though Balerion the Black Dread just breathed an inferno on me just as he did to this dark and dreary place. Eddard took hold of her hand. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to petrify you there, she said with a slight giggle. No, there's nothing to apologize for, Ash. I was just not expecting it, Eddard replied. Though I would do anything just to feel her lips again. On my cheek. And on my lips. As they walked together to find the Lothston Gate, Eddard found himself replaying the scene of her kissing his cheek repeatedly in his mind. This will remain the greatest moment of my life, he thought as he silently breathed in and smelled her sweet-smelling perfumes, which could do nothing but draw him intoxicatingly to her even more than before. Walking with Ash made Eddard feel the happiest he had ever felt in years. As he thought about this, he realized that the last time he had ever felt so happy was before he had left for the Eyrie at 8. Only weeks before Mother had died. Growing up in Winterfell, Eddard had long accepted that the pretty girls of Winterfell and the North were always going to be more interested in Brandon or his best friends Willam Dustin and Mark Riswell. And in the Eyrie, it was the same. Where the girls and young ladies of the Eyrie and the Vale were all more interested in Elbereth and in Robert. He had even overheard them say unkind things at feasts. From the lips of Enissa Grafton, Selira Linderley and Jalyn Hunter. He heard how they mocked him trying to dance. That he would always be an unwed man. And that the only women he would ever share a bed with would be whores. Where are we going? Asked Eddard. To a play. It's a comedy called The Two Knights of Hornhill, Ash explained. They walked together until Eddard spotted a small staging where already there was a large gathering of small folk, knights and nobles. Eddard and Ash stood at the rear as a performer dressed as a knight with a surcoat of a roaring lion was stood at the front of the stage with his squire. Enter, Sir Bohemond the Brave, and his squire Patsy. Arriving at the tourney in Ashford, announced the stage master. Eddard raised his brows as the squire Patsy joined the knight. But as he held her hand, he could feel Ash was on the verge of giggling. Indeed, he glanced out of the corner of his eye, and saw she was already grinning. But Eddard's attention turned when the Patsy the squire spoke. "My lord, behold the castle of Ashford," he said as he pointed in the distance at the imaginary great castle and holding of House Ashford. Sir Bohemond the Brave nodded as he looked at this imaginary castle whilst dramatically humming. "Ah, 'tis a wondrous spectacle, squire. Magnificent." He paused and rubbed his hands together whilst facing Ashford still before talking again. "Now, squire, go and fetch me my sword. The brightest, sharpest, strongest and shiniest sword in all the land." Only for the squire to look down at his feet guiltily. "I'm sorry, my lord, but I forgot it," he said sheepishly. Ash tightened her grip on Eddard's hand whilst she burst into a fit of giggles whilst lowborn and highborn alike laughed. Even Eddard allowed himself a chuckle. As the audience laughed, the face of the performer for Sir Bohemond the Brave turned from a proud and excited face into a disappointed and furious face. He slowly and dramatically turned his head to Patsy the squire, for which Ash dissolved into yet another fit of giggles. "You forgot my sword." Eddard was laughing as Sir Bohemond the Brave rested his chin on the shoulder of Patsy the squire, still glaring at him whilst the squire trembled, supposedly in terror, but the performer looked as though he was struggling to hold in a fit of laughter. "How do you expect me to present myself to Lord Ashford and to all the other knights, my friends included?" "Oh, I'm so sorry, my lord, but I am unable to take part in this tourney, for my fool of a squire completely forgot to bring me my sword from home. How do you suppose this will make me look?" Eddard and Ash burst out laughing yet again as Sir Bohemond the Brave stood tall and glared down at Patsy the squire. "You are the most pathetic excuse for a squire I've ever seen in my life. And I served as a squire alongside the man whom is now Sir Keith the Not-So-Brave. I swear, if I hadn't promised your mother, my sister, that I wouldn't send you to the wall for your incompetence, I would send you to the wall." Eddard had to give Ash a small cloth to wipe her tears, for she had been laughing so much that tears were falling from her eyes. As the audience laughed, Sir Bohemond the Brave stormed away, with Patsy the squire trailing after him, insisting that he can get another sword. "Gods, I love watching a comedy," Ash commented. "Just for the laughter?" asked Eddard. "Not just that. But after a tiring day at court in King's Landing, I feel as though I need something to laugh at," she explained. Eddard smiled at that. "I can understand that. I wished I had discovered the joys of a comedy when I was in the Eyrie," he replied. Ash smiled sadly at him and reached up for his cheek. Eddard shuddered at her touch, feeling petrified at the sweet softness of her hand on his cheek. "It sounds as though you had such a terrible childhood in the Eyrie," she said. Eddard took hold of her hand. "I wouldn't say terrible. After Mother died, I felt alone, a lot of the time, in Winterfell and then in the Eyrie. Though I was surrounded by good people in both places, and made friends in the Eyrie, I had no such good luck with girls or women to the extent that some would say horrible things about me. And cruel words always have hurt me worse than any blows earned on the training yard." Ash rubbed her thumb over the hand which held hers and then reached up for his cheek with her other. "I'm so sorry that you had to go through that, Ned. I want you to forget all that they ever said about you when you are with me," she said before pulling him in for a warm embrace. Feeling her arms wrapped around him, Eddard felt his heart beat with the sound of 100 drums at being so close to her. At feeling her smooth and soft skin under his rough bearded cheek. And breathing and smelling her ambrosial and redolent perfumes in her hair and around her face. "I could spend the rest of my life rooted here with her. And I would still be the happiest man in the world. Ash. Ashura." They broke from the embrace at hearing someone call her name. Both Ash and Eddard turned around to see a young woman riding towards them. "Miria. What is it?" "What's wrong?" asked Ash. "Miria Jourdain, Eddard remembered from what Ash had told him of her fellow ladies-in-waiting. "It's Elia," she replied. "Princess Elia." Both Eddard and Ash followed after her, almost running as they ran back to the Lothston gate. And as her friend, Miria Jordan, climbed down from her horse, they ran to the Kingspire Tower. Eddard followed them as they ran to one of the upper apartments of the Great Tower, which Eddard thought would be almost as tall as the Uri. "Elia. Elia," Ash said as they ran inside an apartment. There, lying on a bed, and with a maester stood by her side, was the Dornish princess, crown princess of Dragonstone and future queen of the Seven Kingdoms. "Elia, are you well?" Ash asked nervously as she took a knee by her side. "I am with child," she said with excitement. Eddard nervously smiled whilst Ash and Miria both excitedly hugged her and congratulated her. "And who is this?" Eddard blushed as he felt the eyes of Princess Elia on him. "This is Ned," said Ash eagerly. She stood up from Princess Elia's side and took hold of his hand and brought him to her side. "My princess," said Eddard, bowing his head to her. "Oh, there's no need for that, Ned. I am Elia." "Do you mind if I call you Ned?" she asked. "Of course not, my Princess Elia," he said, correcting himself. Notes. Ned meets Elia for the first time. And now, Elia is pregnant. How will this play into Rhaegar and his precious prophecies? Chapter 24, The Prince That Was Promised. Summary. Rhaegar finds out that Elia is pregnant. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Lyanna 3. Lyanna walked to the stables in search of her beloved horse, named Petal. She loved walking to the stables of Harrenhal. They were her favorite part of the entire enormous castle. For she could admire and study the many horses of the realm that were stabled there. A small army of stable hands and squires were feeding the horses bales of hay, handfuls of chopped up carrots and apple pieces, brushing them, producing pails of water for them as well as cleaning up their messes. But Lyanna cared not for the smell of their shit and piss. She just enjoyed looking around at the different colors and breeds of horses. Whether it was the agile and speedy sand steeds of Dawn, the proud and groomed stallions of the Reach or the strong, muscular and hairy-hoofed horses of the North, Lyanna was interested and admired each of them from a distance away before she found Petal. She smiled when she found her. "Hello, Petal. How has your day been?" she asked as she stroked her mane and drew an apple from her sleeve. She took a small bite herself before she found a nearby knife and cut a few slices for Petal. Petal greedily took all the slices in an entire mouthful and crunched loudly as she bit down and digested them. "I'm glad that there's at least one beautiful girl here whom doesn't try and eat fancifully and like a lady should," Lyanna commented before kissing Petal's forehead and rubbing it. Petal snorted in reply. Lyanna giggled before she placed her saddle on Petal's back. Lyanna rode out of Harrenhal's tented grounds and encampments until she came to a small wood, stood by the beautiful and peaceful God's Eye. "It's so magnificent here. The lake is so serene and peaceful. And the Isle of Faces remains untouched by the molesting hands of the Andals and the faith of the Seven." But as she rode near the trees, far from the noise and commotions of Harrenhal and the tourney, she saw another horse already there. It was black and was one of the largest and most muscular horses she had ever seen. Strange, she thought. She climbed down from Petal and tied Petal's reins to a nearby tree's branch. Then she turned to the tall and muscular horse. "Hello there. You're a handsome boy, aren't you? But where is your master?" she wondered as she stroked his mane. He neighed quietly before swinging his long head to Lyanna's left. Lyanna raised a brow before passing him a few slices of apple. He greedily ate them up. And Lyanna decided to venture forth to try and find the horse's master. Taking a few steps inside the wood, she could hear something. Venturing further, she heard the sound of a man weeping. Without hesitation, Lyanna looked around, wondering where the weeping man could be. And as she took a few steps further towards where she thought the sound was coming from, the sound became clearer. "Hello. Is everything all right?" she called out. The weeping suddenly stopped. She saw a large rock stood in front of a few oak trees. And she walked towards it and saw a man sat down with his back against the rock. But when she saw the face of the weeping man, her eyes opened wide in recognition. "Robert," she asked, taking a knee by his side. "Leave me be, Lyanna." Please, he begged, his eyes red and his face wet with tears glistening from the sunlight. Robert, I'm right here. And I'm not going anywhere until you tell me what it is that's wrong, she asked. Though Lionel still felt a reluctance to wed him, she couldn't ignore the fact that he was weeping so. That he was clearly sad. She hadn't forgotten what he had done for her and for Howland. She knew now that he was far from what she had imagined of him. That cruel ginger prick. The things he said. What ginger prick, she asked. My own bannerman, John Connington, he replied. What did he say? He mocked them. My parents. Said I should have died with them. That it would have been a blessing to the Stormlands if I had. At their funeral, he did the same, he mocked my brothers and I, when we were in mourning. He said that we should have been honored that mother and father died in service to House Targaryen. Lyanna took a lady's favor she had reluctantly stitched to give to Brandon when he would joust in the tourney. She passed it to Robert. He gently took it and began to wipe the tears on his face. Thank you, he said quietly through his saddened state. For all of that which she had felt of him before she had even met him and what she felt when she had first met him, Lyanna felt guilty. Now that she had seen him at his worst, Lyanna felt pity for him. For all that he had gone through as a boy. She had lost mother at 5. But she still had father, whom was still her father after all that he wanted for her, for Brandon, for Neddy and for Benny. But Robert, he had lost both his parents and was engulfed with the responsibilities of being Lord Paramount of the Stormlands at so young an age. Lyanna held his hands. I'm so sorry, Robert. For what you have gone through. But do not lose your spirit. Don't let that pathetic ginger prick bring you down. You are a Baratheon of Storm's End, the same line that stood up to Targaryen arrogance decades ago. And I saw you stand up to cowardly bullies whom did attack a defenseless man. You are more than that, she said. Robert faced her as she spoke. She saw how he focused on her every word. And how he calmed at hearing her speak. He nodded as she finished. Thank you, Lyanna. Thank you, he said. Elia 4. Lying in her bed, Elia panted and sweated whilst Harrenhal's Maester Manfred, wiped her with a dampened cloth. Some more water, my princess, he offered. Not right now, thank you, she replied with a smile. Lara returned with a quill and some parchment whilst Miria and Ash's dearest Ned stood nearby to help her. How many letters will you write? Asked Lara. I should think only 2. One for Rolla. And the other for Doran, replied Elia, whilst she noticed Ash whispering to Ned. Telling him whom I refer to, she thought. Does Rhaegar know? Asked Ashera. He is on his way. Arthur goes to find him, Elia replied with a nod. If the maiden and the mother are kind, then it will be a son. A prince of House Targaryen and House Martell. Whom shall be a good and wise king. But as Elia rested on her bed, she thought of Rhaegar. He was a good father for Rhaenys back in Dragonstone. But ever since he came across the prophecies and began to correspond with his thrice great uncle Aemon, he has become so obsessed with having 3 children for an ancient prophecy. Elia shivered as she remembered the pains of giving birth to Rhaenys. Though she will never regret giving birth to her beloved daughter, she remembered all too well just how dangerous it was for her to give birth in Dragonstone. And how was bedridden for half a year after giving birth to her. Rhaegar had been by her side back then, caring for her in the stone drum and visiting her every mealtime during those strenuous 6 moons. But when they presented their beloved daughter to the royal court in King's Landing, whilst Rolla warmly greeted her granddaughter, Aerys dismissed her, claiming she looked and smelled too Dornish. Elia looked up when she heard the footsteps of 4 men. 2 of whom wore armor. And the 4th wore soft leather shoes. Rhaegar, Jon, Arthur and Oswell, she deduced. Sure enough, they entered through the chamber doors. Elia. Are you all right? Elia looked up and smiled at Rhaegar as he entered, walking to her side, with Arthur anxiously looked overhead at her. I am, she quietly replied. Arthur said that you are with child, he said nervously. I am, she confirmed with a proud nod and smile. Rhaegar sighed heavily, as though removing a great weight from his shoulders. Thank the gods for this deliverance, she heard Rhaegar mutter for only himself to hear. I lay here, in pain. I will be giving birth moons from now. Possibly at the risk of dying. All to bring another child into the world. And all you can think of is your prophecies. Elia frowned at that. She tried to distract herself by looking around. She smiled at seeing Ash and Ned hold hands and smile at each other. But then she saw Arthur glaring at Ned before walking towards the pair. Oh, Arthur. Let them have their moment together. Ash has not met a man whom is as dear to her for a long time. And even the ones she did like, those despicable fools Wentwater and Osgry, were nowhere near as sweet, as honorable or as gentle as Ned. Roriger turned to Maester Manfred. Maester, how long until she gives birth? He asked. I should think in 6 moons at the earliest. 7 at the latest, my prince, he replied earnestly. Then all is well, Elia heard Roriger mutter quietly once again. We'll leave you be, Elia. My prince. My congratulations once again, said Ash. No, don't leave. Don't leave me with my foolish dreamer of a husband. Ash mouthed sorry to her as she took Ned's hand and left. With Arthur glaring after Ned as they left. Don't murder Ned, Arthur. Ash would never ever forgive you for that. Roriger however heard none of that. He was only muttering to himself. At one point, Elia heard him mutter, he is the prince. The prince that was promised. He will save us all from the long night. From the coming darkness. From the true enemy. The dragon must have 3 heads. Notes. Roriger is now in his delusional dreamlands and thinks not of Elia. Whilst Robert bears his heart out for Lyanna. Will that change how she feels for him? Chapter 25, Jousting for Glory and for Hearts. Summary. Whilst Elbereth jousts to favor Lysa, Baelor jousts to favor Elia. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Baelor 3. Baelor had only Lynest's lady's favor tucked into his bracer as he walked towards Brightwind. Hers was the only one whom he would accept. Now with the news that Elia was with child, Baelor felt that hers was the only one whom he could accept and not feel guilt. Hers was the face he still saw in his dreams. Hers was the voice that he yearned to hear. Hers was the touch he craved for. And yet, as he reached for Brightwind's saddle, he blinked as he tried, but couldn't, push her from his mind. Baelor climbed onto the saddle, struggling to push both his own feet into the stirrups. He took hold of the reins as he looked ahead to his opponent. And then he looked down at Gunthor, whom had his helm, his lance and his shield on hand, ready for Baelor to take hold of. Baelor looked up at the royal box. And there she was. Elia. Dressed in a dress of orange, red and black, combining the colors of House Targaryen and House Martell. Gods! What grievous sin did I commit for you to do this to me? That Elia Martell was the only whom could ever have my heart. That I can never feel anything for any woman but her. Baelor shook his head at his own thoughts. Even if she does not feel the same, I will still win. For her. For Elia and what we might have had. She will be my queen of love and beauty, for she will always remain the queen of my heart. Baelor took hold of his helm in one hand as Gunthor passed it up to him. Whilst still holding his reins firmly, Baelor bent his upper body forwards. He pressed his helm firmly down on his head. Uncomfortable as always, he thought as he moved his head around a little to get used to wearing the heavy steel armlet once again. Jousting now is Sir Arthur of House Dane, the sword of the morning, of his Grace's Kingsguard, announced the tourney master. The crowds cheered and clapped for the knight of legend. Indeed, Baelor knew that were he not jousting, he would be cheering on the favorite knight of his youngest brothers, Gunthor and Humphrey. As the crowds began to calm down, the tourney master raised his voice once again. Baelor looked up at the royal box, where he could see Crown Prince Roriger clapping proudly for his friend, the sword of the morning. And he saw Elia also clapping for him, though lightly clapping in comparison to her husband. Facing the legendary sword of the morning, is Sir Baelor of House Hightower, heir to Old Town, announced the tourney master. Baelor looked back up at the royal box. He felt a blush when he saw Elia clapping proudly for him. He turned his eyes to Arthur Dane, feeling a greater encouragement to continue on. Baelor felt his heart beat with adrenaline, excitement and a deep-sated eagerness to impress Elia. And to win for her. Sir Arthur. Stand ye ready. He raised his lance up high in reply. Balor pressed his visor down firmly as the tourney master turned to him. And as Gunthor passed him up his shield, he heard his booming voice. "Sir Balor, stand ye ready." Balor took his lance from Gunthor and lifted it up high. "Good luck, Balor. The warrior knows you will need it." "I will, brother. Especially against your favorite knight, and that of your brother." But then he glanced at the royal box. "But for her, I would do anything." The buglers played a note. And the crowds cheered as both Balor and Sir Arthur began to charge against each other. Balor stared down at the sword of the morning as he charged at him. Balor did not intend to flinch as he faced this knight of legend. "Come, bright wind. Show the world what you can do. I know that you are the best horse in the world. Now prove it to the world. And most of all, to her." Balor smiled when his lance struck at the upper breastplate of Sir Arthur Dane. And the Kingsguard's lance struck at Balor's pauldron, but caused little to no effect. The great sword of the morning fell from his horse, landing on the grounds whilst Balor remained sat on Brightwind's saddle. His pauldron was battered, but his shoulder was mostly unharmed. As he reached the end of the list, Balor turned and saw Sir Arthur stand up. He took off his helm and looked down at Balor. He nodded at him. Balor removed his own helm and nodded back to him. Balor then turned to the royal box. He ignored the tourney master as he announced his victory. Balor's gaze remained fixed on Elia, whom was clapping happily for Balor. "I love you, Elia Martell." Caitlin 3. Caitlin and Lysa walked together to join Ed Muir, father and Uncle Bryndon in House Tully's box. Whilst Oberyn Martell jousted against Sir Desmond Redwine, she and Lysa took their seats in the box. "Cat. Lysa. Do sit," said father with a beaming smile. They did so, just as the renowned Red Viper of Dawn emerged victorious after 3 lances with against the cousin of Paxter Redwine. Caitlin joined the applause for the dashing and roguish Dornish prince's victory. As they clapped for him, Caitlin noticed father turning to both her and to Lysa. "Now, Cat." "Lysa." "Yes, father," they replied, both turning to him simultaneously. "How goes your respective courtships?" he asked. At that, Lysa and Caitlin turned to each other. Caitlin gestured for her to be the first to speak. Lysa smiled in reply before she faced father. "Mine goes terrifically, father. Sir Elbereth is so kind and diligent. I have shown him around the sights of Harrenhal and he tells me tales of the Uri and of stories of House Arryn whilst introducing me to his uncle and to his friends," she said eagerly. Both Uncle Bryndon and father beamed at her proudly. "Well done, Lysa. I was not sure that Elbereth Arryn would be a good or worthy match for you, and that he spends too much time around with rowdy company such as Robert Baratheon," said father. Lysa's joy paused, as though thinking father intended to break the betrothal. "But, from what you have said, he clearly is a good boy and follows the words of his house correctly," he said before gently patting her shoulder. Lysa beamed positively as she blushed. Their attention turned back to the tourney when the tourney master made his voice heard. "Jousting now is Sir Elbereth of House Arryn, heir to the Uri." Lysa was almost jumping in her seat with excitement as Caitlin looked down at Elbereth taking his place on the tourney grounds. Elbereth took his helm, lance and shield from his squire as his opponent took his place on the grounds. Caitlin shivered when she recognized the armor he wore. He was a knight of the Kingsguard. Whom does he face? Caitlin wondered. Uncle Bryndon looked ahead and raised both brows. "That's the White Bull himself, Cat," he replied. "The White Bull. Lord Commander Hightower of the Kingsguard. Facing Sir Elbereth is Sir Gerald of House Hightower, the White Bull, and Lord Commander of His Grace's Kingsguard," announced the tourney master. Lysa however was not worried when she looked down at Elbereth. Look at Elbereth," she said excitedly. Caitlin looked at what Lysa was pointing at. She spotted a blue lady's favor tucked in his bracer. And she turned back to Lysa. "Does he wear your favor, sister?" she asked with a giggly smile. Lysa nodded with excitement and a giggle as Elbereth and Sir Gerald both raised their lances to show they were ready. The buglers played their note. And Caitlin stood up with Lysa and cheered for Elbereth as he rode against the Lord Commander of the Kingsguard. Lysa was close to jumping up and down with excitement as she cheered for her betrothed as he rode towards the White Bull. Caitlin felt Lysa's hand tighten around her own as the two came nearer and nearer until the point of contact. And then, both lances smashed into steel as they reached the center of the tourney lists. But as Elbert reached the other end of the tourney lists on his own horse, the famed White Bull had no such luck. For he had fallen and landed on his side. Lysa cheered and clapped. Caitlin hugged Lysa as she cheered for Elbert. "Your betrothed may be Artis the Winged Knight Reborn," one day Caitlin commented to Lysa with a smile. Lysa was beaming with excitement as the tourney master formally announced Elbert Arin's victory. Caitlin turned to both father and Uncle Bryndon as they clapped for him. "And what of you, Cat?" asked father. "Of my courtship with Bran, father," asked Caitlin. "Ah. Bran, is it, Cat?" asked Uncle Bryndon with a teasing grin. "Yes, Uncle," she replied with a blushing smile. Caitlin sat back down as Lysa was excitedly talking with Ed Muir about Elbert. "It's so sweet to see Lysa so excited. I've never normally seen her so happy. Normally, she looks so unhappy, as though it is I am whom am making it so. I could never do that to her, whether intentionally or not. We've toured around Harrenhal together. And he has told me of life at Winterfell and what it is like in the north," said Caitlin. "And he has behaved honorably, has he?" asked Uncle Bryndon. "He has, Uncle," she replied with a nod. Uncle Bryndon nodded gruffly. "Good. So long as his reputation stays in the past, then I am happy for you, Cat," said Uncle Bryndon. "I am sure that it is in the past. Bran may have spent numerous adventures with girls and women of easy virtue. But that was before he met me. Once we are formally wed, then all will be well. And his skirt-chasing past will stay in the past." Notes. How will Baela's continued victories affect the plotting inside of Harrenhal? More shall follow. Chapter 26, The Wolf and the Sword of the Morning. Summary. Elbert learns what is going in behind closed doors in Harrenhal. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Elbert 3. Elbert, injured and tired, pulled himself up from the defeat at the hands of Sir Barristan Selmy. "Your Grace, my prince, my princess, my lords and ladies, the victor is Sir Barristan of House Selmy, of His Grace's Kingsguard," announced the tourney master. Elbert reached up to remove his helm. He removed his helm as Sir Barristan turned to face him, not raising his arm to celebrate his victory or to gesturing for the small folk or bask in the adulation from the admiring onlookers, lowborn or highborn. Elbert raised his helm to Sir Barristan as a salute. Sir Barristan raised his own in reply and with a kindly smile. Elbert left the tourney grounds and walked back to the tent. He saw his good squire Joffrey preparing a platter of food and a cup of water for him. Joffrey is a very thoughtful squire. I am glad he is mine. Elbert groaned as he sat down. "Are you all right, my lord?" asked Joffrey. "Ah, fear not. Just a jousting injury. You'll get plenty of them when you joust for the first time," Joffrey Elbert remarked with a smile. Looking at his food and drink, Elbert decided against it now. He stood back up and turned to Joffrey. "Help me with this armor." "Yes, my lord," he said, before putting the platter and cup down and running to his side. Elbert kept his arms out of the way whilst Joffrey unfastened the straps around the cuirass. Joffrey nodded to him and Elbert lifted his arms up. Joffrey now removed the cuirass from him. "Let me see that." Elbert gestured for him to show him the inside of his cuirass. He glanced at the inside. And he grimaced as he saw the indentation that Barristan Selmy's lance had made in his armor. No matter how old a knight gets, they still are more than capable of leaving a mark. Joffrey placed the cuirass down on the side and then unstrapped Elbert's chainmail hauberk, his greaves, his bracers and his boots. "Careful with that," Elbert said when he saw Joffrey handle Lysa's lady's favor. "Yes, my lord," he said before he put it down next to his platter. Joffrey resumed his tasking and pulling off Elbert's boots. "It's ready, my lord," he said. Elbert lifted his arms up and bent his upper body down until he was directly facing the ground. Joffrey soon pulled the chainmail off of him. "Gods, that feels good," Elbert remarked as he inhaled and exhaled. "What do you mean, my lord?" asked Joffrey. "You feel as though you have lost a few dozen pounds in weight whenever you take off a mass of chainmail and armor," Elbert replied as he did the last part himself. He grabbed the nearest pair of leather shoes and slipped his feet into them. Gods, those boots will give me blisters. Joffrey placed the pieces of armor on the mannequin. Now, Joffrey, take my cuirass to a good blacksmith and tell me how much he wants for it to be fully repaired. Yes, my lord, he said before taking the cuirass, stuffing it into a sack and leaving to find a blacksmith. As Elbereth sat back down, he grunted as he felt the pain on his side and his chest from the impact of the lance and landing on the ground. He picked up his platter and his cup of water. He thirstily drank and emptied the entire cup in one full drink. He now looked at his platter, filled with a slice of toast, a fried egg, 2 rashers of bacon burnt black and a finely cooked sausage. Elbereth quickly ate the bacon and the sausage before dipping his toast in the egg yolk before eating the egg and then picked up the slice of toast. But he stopped his lunch when he saw Uncle John walk towards him. When he saw how he walked, Elbereth could tell that this was important. He stood up, still holding the toast in his hand. What could this be about? I've not done anything bad, have I? Elbereth tried not to be loud as he painfully stood up. He took one last mouthful of the toast before he straightened himself to greet Uncle John. Uncle, said Elbereth as he bowed his head to him. Elbereth, come with me. We must talk, said Uncle John with a gentle smile. Elbereth grabbed the lady's favor from Lysa and tucked it in his pocket. What is wrong? Asked Elbereth. Nothing, you have done, have no fear, said Uncle John. Well, that's a relief. But what is this about then? As they walked inside the tent, Elbereth saw Uncle John look around in caution. When he was satisfied, he faced him once again. I had a secret meeting with the Crown Prince, in the Godswood, he said in a hushed whisper. A secret meeting? What about? Asked Elbereth. You've seen the king. You know that the stories and tales of him are no mere exaggeration, he replied. Elbereth grimaced as he remembered that first time he saw him. He was disgusted at what he saw of the king. A man whom John once described as a good man, before Duskendale. But, why does the Crown Prince meet with you in secret? Asked Elbereth. The king is a man whom sees foes everywhere he looks. His mind is not the same as it once was, before Duskendale. Now the Crown Prince has used this tourney to gather support for his cause. His cause is to peacefully remove Aerys from the Iron Throne and with the backing of all Lords Paramount. And you have given your support to him? Asked Elbereth. I have. And, God's willing, this will be over quickly and without unnecessarily bloodshed. Eddard 6. When once Eddard would not care for his courtly appearance in either Winterfell or the Eyrie, Eddard would spend more time in the training yard with Elbereth and with Robert. And on occasion when they were visiting, with Jon, Kyle and Elbereth's cousin Denise. But it was only when his presence was required, would he care to smarten himself for court in the Crescent Chamber. But now, since meeting her for the first time and they first began to court, Eddard was spending what spare time in the morning to smarten himself for the day. To look his best for when he saw her. She whom had his heart. Eddard walked out of his tent and stretched his arms out. He looked up at the Kingspire Tower. He smiled at the thought of meeting her again today. He had already met her friends, Miria Jourdain, Lara Blackmont and of course, Elia Martell. And he had seen her brother, Sir Arthur, in passing. Of course he knew whom he was. His reputation was well known across the Seven Kingdoms as the greatest living swordsman, alongside his sworn brothers Barristan Selmy and Roald Hightower, and their future king, Prince Rhaegar himself. And what has my dear Ned looking so happy for on this fair morning? Eddard turned to see Brandon chuckling with a roguish smirk on his face. His friends Willam, Mark and Jeffrey all were chuckling with him as they faced Eddard. Eddard was just glad that Lyanna and Benjen weren't there to join the teasing of him. Am I outlawed from doing such a thing, brother? Eddard wondered. But his relief that their younger brother and sister were not there, was short-lived. For they joined them, alongside Howland Reed. And had matching smirks when they saw Eddard smartly dressed. Of course you may. In fact, I am glad to see you so happy. Though why remains the question, brother, for I never have seen you so happy. Not on your visits home. Nor my own visits to the Eyrie. So, could it be that my sweet, innocent Ned is in love with the beautiful and fair Jourdain? He asked teasingly. Don't tease him so, Bran. Lyanna said defensively. Oh, he knows that I love him dearly, Sister Brandon replied. All whilst Eddard blushed at the mere mention of her name. Do they have to tease me every time that they see me so happy or dressed to meet her? Now, where have you been, little sister? Asked Brandon. With Howland, Benny and Robert, she replied. Robert. Eddard turned in surprise as well as Brandon, whom looked just as surprised. Robert. Well now, I am surprised. Could it be that the she-wolf of Winterfell is in love with the mighty stag? Brandon asked with a teasing grin. Shut up, Bran. Benny, Howland and I spotted the squires whom attacked him and the knights whom they serve. And Robert has challenged all three of them to joust, she said proudly. Eddard smiled with pride for Robert. I'm glad that he is successful in showing a better side to him. People have only been paying attention to the few times he has been drunk and to fathering little Milestone. He is a better man than they give him credit. And I'm glad that Lyanna now sees that. Eddard finally left the northern encampment and began to make his way to Harrenhal itself and to the Kingspire Tower. As he neared the entrance to the tower, he saw a Kingsguard knight stood there. He recognized him immediately by the hilt of his sheathed greatsword and the violet eyes behind his helm. Sir Arthur. Sir Arthur, he said with a nod. Before he could walk to the door, his way was blocked. He turned to see Sir Arthur's outstretched arm preventing his entry. We should talk, young Stark. Eddard nervously faced him, taking a step away from the door. It was clear to Eddard as to why he had halted him here. Sir Arthur, I can assure you that I would never dishonor your lady sister nor mistreat her nor harm her, Eddard said with conviction. At that, even from behind his helm, Eddard could see his brows raised. So you say? And yet, the company you keep speaks volumes about you, young Stark. The company I keep, sir. Your brother. Your foster brothers, Elbereth Arryn and Robert Baratheon. All of whom are whoremongering drunks. Robert Baratheon has a daughter out of wedlock, he said. And you think me like them? Asked Eddard. Men are judged by the company that they keep. I cannot help whom is my brother by blood and my friends whom I've known since my childhood, Eddard replied. Perhaps. And yet, it begs the question, is that how you would treat my sister? Never. Whatever you may think of me, I am a man of honor. I care for mine own honor. And I care deeply for Ashura's and for her, Eddard replied confidently. At that, the Sword of the Morning raised both brows and fixed his violet eyes, dark violet like grapes on a vine, on Eddard. See that you do. I would not want to wear a wolf pelt with my armor. Eddard gulped as he faced him. Only for the doors to open. And there stood Ash. Dressed in a beautiful violet dress and with her hair decorated in a beautiful and exotic Dornish hairnet. Ned, she said with pleasant surprise. But then she turned to see her brother stood by the door. She raised a brow with a scolding frown. Arthur, what are you doing here? She asked. Meeting young Eddard for the first time, he replied innocently. At that Ash rolled her eyes. Go and be by Elia's side, brother. At that, Sir Arthur walked to the door. It was good to meet you, Eddard, he gruffly said as he left. And you, Sir Arthur, Eddard nervously replied. Ashura V. Returning from her courting with Ned, Ashura sat in her bedchamber, smiling as she thought about Ned. But then she frowned as she remembered seeing Arthur's chance encounter with Ned at the doors to Kingspire. I love Arthur for being protective of me. Which is more than can be said of being protective of Rolla. But he shouldn't have to be such a thing with Ned. Ashura left her bedchamber and walked to find Elia. She soon found her sat on her bed, reading a letter. Ashura beamed at her as she entered her bedchambers. Elia beamed in reply as she looked up. Hello, Ash. How was your courting with Ned? She asked. It had an annoying start, said Ashura. Elia raised both brows at hearing that. Ah, would that have anything to do with Arthur? He told you, said Ashura. He said you rolled your eyes when you saw him and turned your smile at seeing Ned into a frown at seeing your brother, replied Elia with a giggle. As much as I love my brother, it is annoying when he tries to be overprotective. If this is his way to make up for not protecting Rolla, then it is a very poor show of it. It pained Ashura, Elia, Lara and Miria every time that Aes would burn someone. For immediately afterwards, he would command for Rolla to be taken to his bedchambers. And he would force himself upon her. Ashura hated seeing Rolla afterwards, covered in bruises and with scratches on her wrists. Ashura sat on the bed next to her. Elia looked up with a smile. But, Arthur aside, how did it go with Ned? It went well. Really well, Ashura replied, a beaming smile on her face as she said it. Elia beamed at her. I can tell just how much you feel for him, she said. How? Asked Ashura. You smile more than I've ever seen you smile. And your eyes light up like the high tower of Old Town whenever you say his name or talk about him, she explained. You love him, don't you? Ashura turned to Elia. She felt another instant urge to beam with joy at the mere mention of him. And from how Elia looked, she could see a smile on cue. Sure enough, she did smile. I shall take that as a firm yes, Elia said with a beaming smile. Fine, yes, I love him, Ashura confirmed, still smiling as she said it. But what? But what is the drawback? What prevents you from going to him right this very moment and telling each other how you feel? Elia inquired. Ashura frowned at the directness of her question. So direct in fact, that she could have been mistaken for a northerner. I just worry for when I tell him that I am no maiden, that I am the least loved of father's children. Ned will see past that. Ashura felt uncertain at hearing that. How can you be so sure? Asked Ashura. Because he loves you so much. I see that in how he looks at you, she said. But he is honorable. More so than most of court at the Red Keep. When he finds out I am no maiden. She paused and looked down at her hands before she looked back at Elia. I don't want to lose him, Elia. I love Ned so much. I can't lose him. Elia reached out and took hold of Ashura's hand. Ashura held on to Elia's hand as they sat side by side. He will love you no matter what. Ned is a good man. I've seen that for myself. And heard it from your own mouth about him. There is no way in the 7 hells in which he will not love you, no matter what salacious adventures we shared with men and women in the water gardens. Gods, I hope so. Ashura found herself thinking of the gods for the first time in a long time. For ever since Mother had died, she did not think of the gods, nor pray to them. The 7 whom did not answer her prayers for Mother to recover from giving birth to Illyria. And yet she died. Ashura sought to distract herself from the thought of losing Ned. Whom is the letter from? She asked. Said Elia before taking hold of the letter once again. It is from Rolla, she said with a smile. The one respite from Air's presence here is that he cannot harm Rolla. What does she say? Asked Ashura. She talks of little Rhaenys and her games with her and Balerion. And she even let her write a few words here, said Elia before pointing at the bottom of the parchment. Ashura beamed when she saw a few words, where random letters were bigger than others. But she beamed as she read the words miss you, Mama. Me and Grandmama and Balerion. She is such an adorable princess. When I was her age, I could barely string a sentence, Ashura commented. More than me, Elia added with a giggle. Notes. Ned meets Arthur for the first time. Whom is ambivalent towards the quiet wolf. And Elia receives an uplifting letter from King's Landing. Chapter 27, The Strong Storm. Summary. Rather than champion Howland Reed herself, Robert does it for her and for him. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Robert IV. Robert laughed as he threw aside the remnants of his lance. He turned around to see the loser. Sir Leslin Haig struggled to stand up whilst his horse ran ahead. His squire, whom Robert recognized instantly, with a very bruised face, ran to his master and helped him up. Robert rode back to his place, not before claiming his prize. He took Sir Leslin's horse, with a smirk. Lyona's plan is brilliant. It'll show these 3 knights for having such foolish squires. Whilst Artyom took Haig's horse with him to Robert's tent, Robert wasted no time to find his next opponent. He swiftly made his way to the tourney master, where he saw the next jouster. Sir Boros Blount. Robert smirked as he challenged the fat and ugly knight to a joust. Robert climbed onto his horse, his proud horse Stormmane. He patted his back as the mighty horse dug his hoof into the ground a few times, as he often did before they would joust. There is no horse better than you, old friend. Together, we will beat those little pricks. I don't care for winning anymore. Or for the small folk cheering my name. or for all the nobility of the realm to see my skill at arms. But I will do this. For Lionel. Artyom ran to Robert's side, bringing him his helm. Robert grabbed his helm and fastened it on his head before he took his lance and shield. He eagerly held on to both as he looked around. He beamed when he saw Lionel in the Stark box, with Brandon, Ned, Benjen and Howland. He would have waved to her, but then he reminded himself of what she gave him. He looked down at the lady's favor she had made for him. He couldn't help but smile every time that he saw it tucked under his bracer. The best gift a man can receive. Robert looked up when he saw Boros Blount arrive on the tourney lists. He smirked when he saw him climb atop of his horse. Boros Blount. Your squire laid a hand on Lionel and on her friend. And for that, you should be grateful that I am not fighting you with my hammer. Jousting now Sir Robert of House Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End and Lord Paramount of the Stormlands, announced the tourney master. Robert beamed with pride when he saw both Ned and Lionel cheering wholeheartedly for him. And facing off against him is Sir Boros of House Blount. Sir Boros. Stand ye ready. The fat and ugly Crownlander knight raised his lance in reply. Then he turned to Robert. Lord Robert. Stand ye ready. Robert nodded as well as lifting his lance up high. This is for you, Lionel, he whispered. As soon as the buglers played their tune, Robert urged Stormmain forwards. Stormmain charged hard towards the opposite end of the tourney lists. Robert lowered his lance and aimed squarely for Blount's helm. Charging towards him, Robert knocked aside Blount's lance with a powerful swing and closed his eyes as he felt his lance smash. Robert opened his eyes as Stormmain pressed forward. Blount's lance did not strike him. Robert turned Stormmain around. He grinned when he saw Blount fallen from his horse entirely, taking his saddle with him. Artyom caught Robert's eye from across the tourney lists. Robert nodded clearly towards Artyom. Taking this signal, Artyom took Blount's horse whilst Blount's idiot squire ran to Blount's side. That's both Blount and Haig. Now, all that is left is a fucking Free. Tracking down the Free whom the offending squire answered to was the most difficult, Robert remembered. For the size of House Free, there were 24 Free knights attending the tourney alongside their squires. House Free needs a culling, to get rid of many of their spare and useless weasels. It would do the world some good to see less of these ugly frays. But Howland, Lionel and Robert recognized the offending Free when Benjen spotted one with a bruised face and broken nose. He answered to Hosteen Free, 6th son of Walder Free and the best warrior of the twins, it was said. But he's nowhere near as strong or as warlike as me, no matter how much he favors his Crickehall mother's ancestry. Robert was only too glad when Hosteen Free accepted his challenge, only 5 minutes after his victory against Boros Blount. When he turned to his squire blanched when he recognized Robert. Be glad it is not you I am fighting, else I would be smashing my hammer on your hands, that you might never lay a hand on defenseless people again. Robert rode back onto the tourney lists. Artyom, exhausted from running, passed him up his helm. Your last joust for the day, my lord, he asked. It will be. After this, I will resign, Robert admitted. Artyom looked up in surprise. Truly, my lord, asked Artyom. Yes, truly. But, why? You have lost no joust against any knight or lord this tourney, he said with a stunned countenance. Because, I have found something better than glory. Love. Artyom passed him his helm as Hosteen Free arrived on the tourney lists. Robert firmly pressed his helm on his head. Then he took hold of his lance and shield as the tourney master called for silence across the audience. Jousting now is Sir Robert of House Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End and Lord Paramount of the Stormlands. Now he jousts against Sir Hosteen of House Free. Robert ensured he kept a firm grip of both his lance and the leather bounds of his shield. He looked ahead at the Free Weasel whom took hold of his lance and shield. You know what to do when I unhorse the Free Weasel, asked Robert. I do, my lord, he said. Good lad, said Robert before he used his shield hand to lower his visor. Sir Hosteen. Stand ye ready. Hosteen Free lifted his lance up high in reply. Then he turned to Robert. Lord Robert. Stand ye ready. Robert raised his lance as high as he could. As the buglers played their tune, Robert urged forwards. Robert pushed his shield out as he looked ahead at Free. Free was aiming his lance at Stormmane's head. "You fucking weasel. You would dare to harm my beloved horse. You are very close to getting on my bad side. And trust me, you don't want to see that." Robert urged Stormmane to the side a little, to take Free by surprise. It worked. Free's lance was unsteady from this slight performance. And now, Robert's lance struck true, right at Free's upper breastplate, whilst his own lance struck the side of Robert's breastplate. Robert kept a firm hold on the reins. And he stayed on Stormmane. Robert coughed in pain as he reached the other side of the tourney lists. And when he turned around to see his opponent, he grinned at seeing him fallen from his horse, saddle and shield with him. Robert grinned. And his grin turned into a laugh when he saw Artyom run to his horse and take it. Robert rode back to his tent as the audience clapped and cheered. But Robert did not care for them. Instead, he turned his gaze to Lionel, whom was beaming at him and cheering. The sight and sound of which made his heart flutter. Gods, is this how Ned feels around Ashura? Because now I just want to sing to the heavens of what I feel. Robert returned to his tent. He climbed down from Stormmane. He sighed with exhaustion as his feet hit the ground. "I am starving. How about you, Stormmane? Porridge or apples?" he asked as he stroked Stormmane's neck. Stormmane neighed at the mention of the latter. "Apples it is, lad," he said before patting his head. "Artyom. Feed this champion horse his just reward," he cheerfully boomed. "Yes, my lord. My lord, you have guests," he said as he brought a handful of apples. "Guests?" But Robert beamed with delight when he saw Lionel approach with Howland, Ned and Benjen. "You rode like a centaur out there," Lionel commented. "All thanks to this fine lad here," Robert complimented as he patted Stormmane as he ate a mouthful of apple slices. "Well done, Robert." "And thank you," said Lionel. Before Robert could say anything, she leant forward and stood on top toes and kissed him on his lips. Robert could not hear the sounds of voices around him over his own heartbeat. He wrapped his arms around Lionel and pulled her in to deepen the kiss. The sweet taste of her lips was unlike anything Robert had felt before. When he first kissed a girl at 8, he thought it was the best feeling in the world. But this was far better than any kiss he had shared with girls or women. For this was Lionel. The love of his life. His betrothed. And whom would one day be his wife. As they finally broke from the kiss, Robert felt a deep blush on his face. Lionel giggled at seeing the blush on him. "What can I say? You make me feel like a shy little boy," Robert admitted with a grin. "You were anything but a shy little boy out there," she complimented. "Robert." Robert looked up at Ned upon hearing the concern in his voice. He nodded behind Robert. And Robert turned around to see them. Boros Blount, Leslin Haig and Hosteen Free. "My Lord Baratheon. What ransom must we pay for our horses?" asked Haig. Robert glanced at Lionel. She shook her head. He turned back to them, and saw their squires behind them, as well as numerous nobles, knights and small folk. "Perfect. You may have your horses back, free of charge or coin," he said. They looked at him in surprise. But before they could voice their thanks, Robert made himself heard again. "My only terms are this, that you teach your squires honor." "What is your meaning, Lord Baratheon?" asked Blount. "My meaning?" Robert asked as he took an intimidating step towards them. "My meaning is that your squires earned those bruises and broken noses from mine own hands, when they had the audacity to attack a defenseless man. A defenseless man whom is bannerman to my betrothed's lord father." At that, the offending squires sheepishly remained rooted on the spot, whilst their masters turned to them with infuriated glares. And whilst the small audience gathered nearby watched with interest, gossiping what was being said and seen. "We will," Lord Baratheon boomed Free with gritted teeth and an infuriated glare towards his squire. Artyom passed the reins of their horses back to their own horses. And as the knights climbed onto their horses, they loudly berated and mocked their squires for their actions as they left. Brandon, Benjen, Howland, Ned, Robert and Lionel all laughed as Robert and Lionel held hands and watched them leave in shame. "Artyom, help me out of this armor and then inform my decision to the tourney master," said Robert. "I shall, my lord," keenly said Artyom. "What decision was that, Robert?" asked Ned. My resignation from the tourney. Ned, Lionel, Benjen and Brandon looked at him surprised at this decision. But why? You defeated every opponent on the lists, said Brandon. Robert lifted Lionel's hand that he held and kissed it before he replied. Because I found something better than glory and gold. This time it was Lionel's turn to blush. Oh, look at her. You are blushing, sister, said Benjen. Shut up. Lionel snapped, at which Robert laughed whilst Artyom helped him out of his armor. As Robert took off his chainmail hauberk and inhaled and exhaled deeply, he heard his name called again. My Lord Baratheon. Robert turned around. He saw a thin and pasty man wearing the livery of a man in service to the Targaryens. Yes. His Grace, the King, summons you to the royal box. Alone, he said. Robert and Brandon shared a brief, but concerned glance. He knew of what Roriger had talked of with him. And of what his lickspittle Connington spoke of. I'll be there. Just let me get my doublet on, he said. Of course, my lord, he said with a bow of his head. Robert donned his doublet and turned to Artyom. Once you've spoken to the tourney master, bring my armor back to the encampment, give Stormmain a quick bath and prepare some dinner for me. I am famished. Yes, my lord. Robert followed the servant to the royal box, where Robert saw Sir Barristan Selmy unhorse Connington. Seeing him fall, Robert burst out laughing. A shame I couldn't do that myself. He calmed himself down before he came towards the king. Robert shivered when he came face to face with him. Father had told him of how close he was with Aerys, and that the two were dear cousins and friends. Their friendship continued, even after the defiance of Duskendale, until mother and father died, trying to find a Valyrian bride for Roriger. The man before him was not the man father had introduced him to when he was only a few years older than Renly. He was gaunt and as thin as a dinner fork. His fingernails were almost a foot long and as yellow as his own teeth. His hair was long to the extent that it was longer than Lionel's, reaching down to her waist. And his beard was knotted and tied, reaching down to his chest. Robert. It's been so long since last I saw you, dear boy. Though you are far from a boy, from what I saw of you this day, he said with a smile. And there's the man that father loved dearly. Your Grace gives me pride to say such things, said Robert. Oh, it's the least I could do. Your father was dear to me and he is very sorely missed by us both. I know he would be proud to have seen the man that you are now. Man enough to unhorse over a dozen opponents. And I hear you wield a warhammer with only one hand. It is true, Your Grace. Though not as intimidating as Kingmaker, I know it would frighten enemies to run like sheep, he replied. He smirked at that. Of that, I have no doubt, he said as he stood up and gripped Robert's bicep and felt his muscles. He turned to his own son, Robert's cousin, Roriger. You see, Roriger. This is how strong a man should be. Which you would know if you stopped spending all your spare time with scrolls and books. Robert fought hard to resist a laugh or even a grin at his cousin. Now, what's this I hear about you resigning? So soon after unhorsing 3 nights in a row, asked Aerys. What to say? What would father say? Oh, Your Grace, it is true. Truth be told, I thought myself inexperienced against the likes of Sir Barristan or Sir Baelor Hightower. And this way, I at least remain undefeated, he replied. Aerys paused and fixed a stare on him. Robert felt a slight sweat on his brow. But then Aerys broke into laughter and patted his hand on his back. You speak as well as you joust and fight. And just like your father. Oh, it only makes me miss him even more. It was good to see you again, Robert. Now, don't let me keep you. Obviously you want to spend time with your beautiful betrothed. Robert bowed and took his leave from Aerys. Notes. Robert continues to prove himself to Lionel. And no Knight of the Laughing Tree to stir things up. Chapter 28, A Letter from Home. Summary. Baelor reunites with an old friend, whilst Tivette receives a letter from home. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Baelor 4. Baelor quickly sipped water from the waterskin Gunthor passed up to him. By the warrior, I needed that. Baelor passed it back down to him after draining the entire waterskin. And Gunthor ran back with a 5th lance and a 2nd shield. Balor looked down at his battered armor. He had taken 2 hits to his breastplate, and a third to his shoulder. The 4th lance had struck his shield instead of his armor, which Balor was grateful for he was uncertain that he could take another hit from his lance. Gods, Barristan the Bold has lost none of his skill that he has attained since the days when he was Gunthor's age and earned his nickname from Prince Duncan the Small, Balor thought as he took a firm grip of his lance and his shield. Then he looked down at Sir Barristan Selmy, whom was passed another lance and shield by his own squire. "5th time lucky, brother?" asked Gunthor. "Let us hope so, little brother," said Balor before clicking his tongue and maneuvering Brightwind around. He stroked Brightwind's neck. "We're so close now to victory, Brightwind. We are amongst the best now." 4 times they had jousted against each other. Thrice, he had struck Sir Barristan's armor. But still, both knights kept a firm grip on their reins and kept themselves on their horses. "Old Town. We light the way," Balor muttered as he lowered his lance and the buglers played a loud tune. "Come on, Brightwind." Balor charged towards Barristan the Bold, one of his heroes from when he was Gunthor's age. Because on his first tourney at Blackhaven, at 10, he never gave up to prove himself up. In spite of the ridicule he faced, he still earned his nickname from kindly Prince Duncan and proved himself a better jouster than most knights twice or even thrice his age. Balor did not shy his eyes from his opponent as his lance was aimed at Sir Barristan's breastplate. He felt his shield's grip weaken from overuse of his hand and from his arms being exhausted. "Come on. Just a little longer." And at the point of impact, Balor's lance struck at the breastplate of Barristan the Bold. And Sir Barristan's own lance disarmed him of his shield. Whilst Brightwind rode on, Balor turned his head to look at his opponent. He smiled with relief when he saw he lay on the ground. Balor quickly climbed down and was about to run to his side, only for Sir Barristan to stand up and remove his own helm. He saluted Balor with his own helm. Before Balor removed his own helm and returned the salute, Balor climbed back onto Brightwind and rode back to his tent. He personally fed Brightwind several slices of apple and carrot whilst Gunthor groomed him. "Bathe Brightwind, Gunthor. He deserves it after all of the hard work he has done today. He'll have harder work tomorrow, Balor." "That he will. But he's earned it." As Balor relaxed on his seat, free of his steel plate and chainmail, he drank from a cup of arbor gold when he saw a familiar face a stone's throw from his tent. His was an unforgettably handsome face. And Balor had no doubt as to where he was going. His point was proven when he made a beeline for Balor. His sun-kissed face possessed a devilishly grin which flashed at Balor. His black and viperous eyes were fixed on him as he stepped near Brightwind. He cast a quick and admiring eye at Brightwind and stroked his neck. "A fine horse you have, Balor. How long have you had him?" "2 years now, Oberyn." "His name is Brightwind," Balor replied. He grinned when he faced Balor again. "Brightwind. What sort of name is that?" "It combines the nickname you gave me and the one your sister gave me." "Breakwind and Bright Smile," Balor replied with a grin similar to his. At that, they shared a laugh. Oberyn pulled a chair and sat next to Balor. "It is good to see you again, Balor. I know you must have had some effect on Elia," he said. "What makes you say that?" Balor asked, genuinely curious. "Because she is smiling as brightly as she did during that time we spent in Old Town," he replied. "Those were some of the best days of my life. Admittedly, I spent all of that time with you and Elia, more than I did so as heir to Old Town," Balor thought with fond nostalgia for meeting Elia for the first time. Tijet 4. At the conclusion of the match between Sir Barristan the Bold and Sir Balor Hightower, Tijet began to leave the tourney grounds in Harrenhal itself. "A pity I didn't sign myself on. I might have shown the fighting prowess of the lion here. Poor Jaime is too busy getting into his forced-upon duties to take part. The best that the Westerlands has provided was a Dammar brand, Lyle Crickehall and Tywin's brutal dog, Gregor Clegane." Tijet regretted his decision to not take part in the tourney, especially now that the young champions of the Westerlands had been beaten. Gregor Clegane had been unhorsed by Prince Roriger himself. Lyle Crickehall had been unhorsed after 2 lances by Robert Baratheon. And Jaime's best friend from childhood, Mar Brand, had been unhorsed by Baelor Hightower. But on his return to the Westerland's encampment, he heard a voice call out his name. Sir Tyrget Lannister. Tyrget turned around. He saw a man wearing the livery of House Went, stood by the doors to the Kingspire Tower, holding a letter in his hand. "I am he, boy," said Tyrget as he approached the servant. The servant turned to him. "Milord, a raven just arrived for you. I was directed to deliver it to you by Maester Manfred," he said before passing it to him. Tyrget took the letter in hand. He reached for his pocket and picked out a silver stag. "Thank you, boy. Now, on your way." He took his leave after pocketing the coin. Tyrget glanced down at the seal. It was indeed Tywin's personal seal. Since becoming Lord of Casterly Rock and then Hand of the King, Tywin had shared a secret to him, Kevan and Geryon, that only they knew. That in case of someone attempted to forge his seal, he had left a clue to prove if it was indeed his seal or someone else's. The clue was a small scar across the lion's chest. Tyrget nodded when he saw the scar on the lion's chest of the seal. He tucked the letter in his pocket and looked around. Seeing no potential threat, he began to make his way back to the Westerland's encampment. Arriving, he looked at Jaime's friends, Adam Marbrand and Lyle Crickehall. Both were having a friendly spar with other knights and young lords cheering them on. And then he saw the violent and brutal Clegane. Clegane, seemingly still infuriated at being unhorsed, roughly grabbed a common whore by her shoulder and threw her into his tent. "Someone help me," she screamed. "Fucking shut up, whore!" Clegane shouted before a shrill scream of pain pierced the air. What a foul creature Tywin keeps under his command. Tyrget entered his tent and broke the seal. He unfurled the letter and held it up to the candlelight amidst the setting sun and rising darkness. What could this be about? What does Tywin intend to do now? Tyrget. You were right to make it a clear condition of House Lannister's support for the errant Crown Prince to release Jaime. Once the tourney has ended and all is confirmed, I shall make arrangements to go to King's Landing. I have no intention to miss the chance to see Aerys removed from the Iron Throne. Elia Martell's gestation means nothing. I will have Pycelle see to that and ensure that Rhaegar weds Cersei when he is king. Upon your return to Casterly Rock, I will see to it that you are suitably rewarded for your hard work. Yours sincerely, Tywin. As always, Tyrget hovered the letter over the nearest candle's flickering flame. The letter began to set alight. As the flames began to engulf the letter, Tyrget threw the letter to the grass at his feet. He watched as the letter burned entirely. With the letter burnt, he thought of Tywin's message. Deal with Elia Martell. What is he thinking? Cersei as queen. I love Tywin's children dearly, but Cersei is a spoiled and stupid girl who may know how to claim power, but not how to use it. And as for Elia Martell, I have nothing personal against the girl. She is a kind woman. The sort whom would make a fine queen, just like Rulla. And Joanna was friends to both Rulla and to Elia's mother, Princess Lorza. What would she say if Tywin were to have done something to the girl? I will need to send another letter to Tywin. To convince him to hold off on having anything done to Princess Elia. Any move now could spell disaster. Especially before Aerys is deposed and Rhaegar is crowned. It may be best to wait and see if she does actually give birth. She was bedridden for half a year carrying Princess Rhaenys. She may yet suffer worse if she does give birth again. Or the child may already die at the time of birth. Notes. Tyrget wonders if his brother's plans will have any future merit. Especially when his opinions of Cersei are very low. Chapter 29, The Kraken and the Dragon. Summary. Harlon receives his winnings, and a surprise invitation. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Harlon 3. Harlon, Roderick, Baelor, Gorald and Uthor stood in Harlon's tent in the small Iron Island's encampment as servants of House Went, escorted by household soldiers and knights brought 50 chests, heavy with coin. Harlon couldn't help but grin at hearing the clinking of coins in each of the chests as they were brought to the tent. 25,000 gold dragons, as you have won, my Lord Greyjoy, said Sir Osferth Went, heir to Harrenhal, before passing the key to all chests to Harlon. Harlon smiled as he took the key. My thanks, sir, simply said Harlon before offering his hand to Harrenhal's heir. He shook Harlon's hand before he took his leave, with his house's knights, soldiers and servants following after him. Harlon unlocked the closest chest with the key and opened it for all to see. He gasped at all of the gold inside. "Fuck my balls," muttered Gorald. "So much gold. It's making my cock hard," whispered Uthor. "I've never seen so much coin and in just one place," said Baylor. "This prize purse will be of great benefit. And no Ironborn can deny that I did not pay for it all with the gold price. Though 25,000 is a mere sixth of the greatest prize in this tourney, it is a great sum of coin. Roderick will know what to do with it all. He is the one with all the great ideas, as father likes to say. Lord Greyjoy." Harlon turned around to face a Kingsguard knight. From the carven image of a bat on his helm, Harlon saw that he was Sir Oswell Went. What could this be about? "I," asked Harlon. Baylor, Roderick, Gorald and Uthor stood by his side. All five of them ready in case this turned into a fight with the mainlanders. "His Grace, the King, summons you to the Kingsipra Tower," he said. "The King? Why?" Harlon cleared his throat nervously. "Did His Grace say why?" "He did not, my lord. Only that you were to come at once." "Could he know about my meeting with Roriger?" "Lead the way then, Sir Oswell," Harlon replied with a nod. Sir Oswell nodded and turned around. "Keep your head about you. Be courteous and be careful. Hear the king out and say nothing that may incriminate you or the Crown Prince," Roderick whispered in his ear. Harlon nodded at Roderick's words before following after Oswell Went. He followed the Kingsguard knight from the Iron Islands encampment back inside Harrenhal and towards the Kingspire Tower. As Harlon looked around Harren's Folly, he snarled in bitterness towards the man whom built it. The last king of the Iron Islands. Or king of isles and rivers, as he was back then. What was that fucking moron Harren the Black thinking? All the coin and resources he had spent in building this place, from both the Riverlands and the Iron Islands, drained both kingdoms of coin that could have been used to fight off the dragon invaders. All of it could have been put to good use in the Iron Islands. But no. After Harwin Halfhand conquered the Riverlands, all Hawkings looked down on the Iron Islands, preferring life in Halfhand's gains, first at Fairmarket and then here. But then he and Oswell Went entered the Hall of 100 Hearths. Harlon looked around the imagery on the walls. He smiled at the familiarity carved on the walls. Harlon was glad that the families succeeding Harrenhal, the Cahiris, the Harroways, the Towers, the Strongs, the Lothstons and the Wents had not rid the walls of it. On the walls were carven imagery, from the bottom to the roof. Runes and images, carven images of legends of the Iron Islands, from the Grey King slaying Naga to Harwin Halfhand claiming victory over the River Kings. The imagery reminded Harlon of the imagery carved in various halls and chambers back home in Pike. A pleasant little reminder of home, at least. To remind the whores of back then that they were still Ironborn, not mainlanders. Harlon then turned to the king. The king that was Aes the Mad, sat on the throne of Harren the Black. Made of black oak and with decoration carved on every inch of the throne. From what I have heard of the Iron Throne, I am sure that Harren the Black's throne is more comfortable than your one back home. Your Grace, Lord Harlon of House Greyjoy, heir to Pike and the Iron Islands, announced a herald with a voice high-pitched as though he were a eunuch. Harlon bowed, as was expected of him. The chains holding his fur cloak and Greyjoy cloak rattled as he bowed. Harlon was proud to wear the armor he wore. He only wore silks when taking Alanis to bed. But every piece of armor he wore, he paid for with the iron price. All of it he had earned from fighting and killing pirates from Westeros to Yeti. Harlon stood straight when directed to by the gesturing hand of the Mad King. The glare he fixed on Harlon was a fierce one. Harlon shivered. For it reminded him of Euron when he looked at him with his black crow's eye and not his blue smiling eye. Lord Harlon. I have met your father a few times, in the War of the Ninepenny Kings. A strong and hardy one. A man of the sea, more so than most Valerius I have known throughout my life. But I have heard that he wishes to change the Iron Islands from its ancient and piratical ways and into a civilized way of life. Do you feel the same as Lord Quayan? He enquired. I do, Your Grace. That my family, my people and my country might be saved from ancient ignorance and a chance to better our livelihoods and lands without endless bloodshed and wanton destruction, he replied with proud conviction and purpose. The king narrowed his eyes at him. He may be mad, and have no care for courtly appearances, or what people think of him. But he does possess a sharp mind. When I was a child, I can remember the tales my grandfather Egon told me of the fearsome Ironborn reavers. And his dear friend, Sir Duncan the Tall, told me of when he, Bran Stark and Gerald Lannister battled the Iron Fleet of Dagon Greyjoy. As a boy of 6, I would have night terrors of the spectre my mind conjured of Dagon Greyjoy. Harlon fixed his eyes on the king, refusing to blink. He did not intend to show fear to him. He felt a sweat on his brow and in his hair. And there was a persistent itch at the back of his neck, but still, he did not react. The king broke the silence. I am glad to see that both your father and you have decided to move on from such barbaric ways. It makes me glad to know that my kingdom of the Iron Islands is safe under Lord Quarian's rule and shall be safe under your rule when the time comes, he spake. My thanks for your trust, your grace, said Harlon, bowing his head to him. He gestured for him to leave. Harlon bowed once again and turned around to leave. By the drowned god, that had me itching something fucking fierce. Notes. Harlon met Aerys and did not get arrested for treason. I still wouldn't put him in a political position in King's Landing. He would challenge every player of the game to a finger dance. Chapter 30, An Amorous Courting. Summary. Ned and Ashara court well into the night. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Eddard 7. It was the second last night of the tourney. And so, Eddard had agreed to meet up with Ash in the stables. Eddard walked to the stables from the northern encampment. He smiled when he found his horse. A Vale horse whom he had named Frostfoot. Growing up in the Eyrie, Eddard loved to listen to the tales Jon would tell of the legendary knights of the Vale and his own ancestor, Artisarin, the Winged Knight. Eddard particularly loved the tale that the greatest knights of the Vale returned as the finest war horses that Westeros had seen. And that when it came to battle, no resurrected horse would ever turn from battle. What battles did you fight when you were a proud knight of the Vale? Eddard asked as he ran his fingers through his mane. Frostfoot neighed quietly before shaking his head. Almost as broody and contemplative as his master. Eddard beamed at hearing her voice. He turned around to see her beaming at him in the light, illuminated by nearby fire braziers and torch sconces. As well as wearing riding leathers, she wore a violet dress over it. Even with riding leathers, still Ash looked so breathtakingly beautiful. What is yours called? She asked. Frostfoot, he replied. She giggled her giggle that Eddard loved to listen to. Frostfoot, I like that. Mine is called Starshine, she said as she walked to her own horse. A Dornish sand steed, pale white in color and with a lilac-colored saddle. Starshine. A beautiful horse to match its mistress. She turned around. Beautiful, am I, Ned? She asked with a teasing grin. Eddard blushed and looked down at his feet at her question. She giggled once again. Even after a week of courting, and still you blush like a little boy whenever I tease you, so she said as she came up close to him, so close that he could see the flames of a brazier behind him reflected in her beautiful violet eyes. She was so close, that Eddard wanted nothing more than to hold her in his arms and kiss her until the long night took them both. That would be my love for you, burning up inside me. Eddard allowed himself a quick chuckle as she came up close to him and reached out and stroked his cheek. I truly enjoy our company, Ned. But, I don't want it to end, she said with a sad smile. Neither do I. I want this to last forever, if it could. Then let's enjoy tonight, Ash said Eddard. Her sad smile turned into an uplifting one. Yes. Yes, we shall, she said. Eddard climbed onto Frostfoot whilst Ash climbed onto Starshine. They rode together to the God's Eye. Their horses skirted on the coastline around the great and peaceful lake. And from all sides that they rode, Eddard could spy the magnificent and sere Isle of Faces. A sacred place of the old gods, which remained untouched and undefiled by the hands of the Andals and the faith of the Seven. But as they neared a stream, they slowed the gallops of their respective horses. Both horses stopped near the stream and began to thirstily drink water from the stream. Eddard held Ash's hand as they looked out at the Isle of Faces. It is so beautiful from here, said Eddard. I have heard it said that there are children of the forest still there, hidden from civilization and still living their lives as their ancestors did in ancient times, said Ash. I have heard those tales also. I'm just glad that the faith of the Seven have never tried to trespass there and burn it, as they have burnt God's woods and heart trees across Westeros, said Eddard. Ash turned to Eddard, looking surprised by how strongly he felt by this. Have you always felt like this of the old gods? How could I not, when I've met many of the faith of the Seven whom hate mine own faith and mock it, he wondered aloud. She held his hand. There is a godswood and a heart tree in Starfall. It was peaceful there. Peaceful and beautiful. But I never went there to pray. Housestein follows the Seven. But I stopped going to pray at the September. Why? Asked Eddard. After Mother died giving birth to Illyria. I had prayed endlessly to the Seven to spare Mother. But they did not. Eddard saw how upset it made Ash to talk of this. He held her closer to him and leaned his head towards her. She beamed and held on to him with a smile. Ned. There's something I must say. He asked as he stood straight and faced her. She held both hands as she faced him and looked up at him. I know we have only known each other for a short while, but I truly love you. Hearing her speak those last 4 words filled Eddard with a happiness that made all the previous times she had made him feel happy pale in comparison. Eddard wanted nothing more than to climb to the highest turret tops of the wall and sing to the world of his love for Ash. Ash. Ned, let me finish, please, she said. Eddard was worried when he saw how her joyous smile turned to a saddened grimace. I love you, but that is why I must be honest. I am not a maiden. She looked down at their holding hands before she looked back up at him, with tear-filled eyes. I have laid with other men and women. I know that you must be disappointed. And that you must think me a whore. But I could not hide this from you. I love you. And I know you love me too. Her gaze went down from his face and to the ground. Ash. She reluctantly looked up to face him. I could never ever stop loving you. No matter what you have done and said, there is nothing that would ever make me change the way I feel about you. Ash exhaled a breath she was holding in. You truly mean that? You were not betrothed to any of those men. So how could I ever hate you? He asked as he reached for her tear-stained cheek. He wiped her tears with his sleeve. I love you so much, Ashura Dane. And nothing could ever change that. She giggled slightly at hearing that before she leant in. She captured his lips with her own. Eddard felt petrified at feeling her lips on his own. Ned, she asked as she broke from the kiss. He tried to say. She held his hand. I'm not your first kiss, am I? He felt a burning blush on his face at this question. What? I am, she asked in astonishment. Eddard blushed, at which she giggled before leaning in and kissing him again. This time, Eddard held on to the kiss for dear life. He wrapped his arms around her and held her in a warm embrace as his tongue fought with hers. Eddard couldn't think of anything better than kissing her, he felt as they kissed. Ashura 6. Returning to Harrenhal's stables, they put their respective horses in their own stables before Ashura held on to Ned's hand. She felt a bliss as she held his hand. He told her he loved her, no matter what she had told him of the past. And she loved him even more for it. I don't want this night to end just yet, Ned. I want to end it with us consummating our love for each other. For I have never loved another like I love you. And I don't want to feel like this way ever again. Ned, come with me. He looked at her with bemusement. Ash, what is this? Where are we going? She didn't answer him just yet. She led him towards the Kingspire Tower and up the staircases until they reached the apartments on the 12th floor. Ash, where are we going? He asked again. My bedchambers, she said, a seductive grin wide on her face. The realization soon dawned on Ned's face. Ash, we cannot do this. Ned, we said that we love each other. You told me that you love me, she said with an adorable pout. And I do. I love you more than I could ever love anyone else. But I cannot dishonor you so. She ignored him as she opened her chamber doors. She dragged him inside and pushed him against the wall. Swiftly, She closed the chamber doors and pressed both palms on the wall around Ned before leaning in and kissing Ned on his hard lips with her own soft lips. Gods, I love you, Ned Stark. Ash, don't do this. Please. I cannot dishonor you, he begged as soon as they broke from the kiss. You will not dishonor me, Ned, she said sweetly before taking a few steps back. Watch this instead, Ned, she thought with a smirk. Her hands reached up to the top of her dress. Ashura, we cannot do this, my love. Ned insisted, though Ashura felt a naughty grin as she spotted how his eyes darted to her hands. As her hands reached for the straps of her dress. Just a little longer, she thought as she wiggled her feet around, until her uncomfortable riding boots fell from each foot. I hate wearing riding boots. Ned, we said that we love each other. And I told you that I am not a maiden anymore. I cannot be dishonored by you. But your reputation. I do not want to give a reputation you do not deserve, he insisted. Oh, my sweet and beloved Ned. No one saw us come here, Ned. And no one will see you leave, she replied with equal insistence. As she spake the last word, her hands fell to their sides. But in doing so, there was nothing holding her dress in place, now that she had unfastened the straps. Her dress fell to her heels, leaving only her bare underclothes on, which were barely much. Ashura grinned seductively at how Ned's eyes opened as wide as a gull's egg. And at how his mouth opened wide like a hungry wolf eyeing an unsuspecting doe by watering hole. Ashura reached up to her underclothes and quickly pulled them off with a widening grin. With her body completely uncovered by silk or clothing, Ashura stared at Ned, still clothed, but whose body betrayed him. As Ash, he tried to say. Words failed him as his mouth remained opened wide. And his erection poked out from his trousers. Oh. You are very well endowed, my sweet Ned. Ashura giggled as she reached up to her breasts with both hands. She needed them as she gently kicked her dress away and began to slowly walk towards Ned. She lifted both arms up, her hands reaching for her braided hair. She removed the hairnet that held it all together and the braid that it was tied in. And she felt as all her luscious black hair fall just above her waist. With every moment her arms made, her breasts swayed from side to side. She felt her nipples harden as she looked at Ned and his growing erection, bursting to be free. And she felt herself dampen and moisten with every step she made. Ned. I love you. And you love me. Nothing bad will happen here. What matters is that we love each other, she said as she reached for his hands. He gulped as she took hold of his hands. And placed them on her breasts. Come on, Ned. I know that the wolf inside you yearns to be free. His eyes widened more, if that was possible, at how his hands touched her breasts and nipples. She moaned quietly, but seductively as she felt his hands. Ah. I cannot take this. Ned finally muttered. Yes. I knew that you wanted this. Ashura grinned victoriously as Ned began to rush to take his clothes off whilst she slowly walked to bed. As she climbed onto bed, she turned on her knees to face Ned. And saw him naked. His arms and legs were thick with muscle. His chest was hard with 3 rows of abdominal muscles. And his member was as thick, long and hard as his arm, she thought. Ashura felt herself dampen even more to the extent that she reached down to her clit. Come, Ned. Come to bed, she said, her voice laced with excitement. He almost charged straight for the bed. Ashura giggled as she fell on her back, pulling Ned with her, grabbing him by his shoulders. She kissed him longingly as she held on to him there. She stroked his face as she felt her breasts and nipples brush against his muscled chest. And she felt his huge member brush against her waist and her clit. Though she yearned for more, she kept kissing him there, wanting to stay and enjoy the kiss. And with every moment that they kissed, Ned seemed to be braver. For his hands rested at first on her hips. Until they reached up for her breasts. Ashura broke from the kiss with a giggle. Go on, Ned. I know how much you want to, she said. Ned breathlessly turned from her face and to Ashura's breasts. Without warning, he dove in like an eagle swooping down to catch its prey. Ned licked, kissed her nipple before he began to suck on her breast. Ashura moaned as his free hands explored all around her body. Both reached down for her ass. As they fondled her ass, Ned's tongue and lips continued to leave their mark on one breast before they moved to the next, making Ashura moan more and more with each lick and kiss. You enjoy that, don't you, Ned? You are so delicious, Ash. I could bury myself in your tits and your ass, he said wantonly. Bury yourself in my tits and ass. Oh, Ned. What have I done to my sweet and innocent quiet wolf? She raised her hands to Ned's shoulders. Ned paused and looked at her with concern. Have I done something wrong? He asked innocently. Gods, this man. No, you have done nothing wrong, my sweet Ned. No, you are very skilled with your tongue and lips. But now, it is time I did the same for you, she said before reaching down for his member. Ned groaned at feeling both her hands around his member. It was so long and thick that she needed both hands to have a complete and full grip around him. Ashura gently pushed him off her. As he lay down on the bed, Ashura slowly hovered over him until she began to plant kisses on his member. With every kiss, it throbbed even more. And every time it throbbed, Ned groaned at volume. I know how to improve this, thought Ashura with a grin before she reached up for both her breasts, wet with Ned's kisses and licks. She wrapped both breasts around Ned's member. Ned stared with amazement at her breasts wrapped around him. He groaned as he felt them. Oh, Ash, this feels so amazing, he groaned. Nothing but my best for you, my love, she thought before she planted one last kiss on the tip. Before he could react when she pulled her breasts away, she wrapped her lips around the tip and began to push down. She licked it with every inch of him that went inside her mouth. Ned's groans increased in volume at feeling him inside her mouth. There is absolutely no way I can fit this entire thing in my mouth. It would reach all the way past my neck if I did somehow stuff it all the way inside. Gods, what will it look like when he is all the way inside me? Her sucking of his member continued for a minute until she decided to stop. Ash. Ned looked up from where he lay, anxiously looking at her for direction. Now, Ned, my love. Now the fun begins, she said, her seductive grin reaching her eyes as she said it. She lay down on the bed. Come, Ned, she said. Ned came towards her. Realizing what was next, he lined up his huge member against her clit. Gods, he's made me so wet, that he doesn't need to contribute with his tongue or his fingers, she realized. Ned pushed the first few inches inside. Gods. It's so big. Ashura tried to relax with deep breaths. But with each deep breath, Ned pushed further and further inside of her. Gods, it is so enormous. Ashura tried to keep her voice quiet as she felt Ned inside her fully. He groaned at reaching so far inside of her. But as he pulled back, he thrust back fully. This time, Ashura couldn't keep herself quiet. Gods. Oh, Ned. Oh, you are so big, she moaned. Ashura pulled Ned towards her. She tried to kiss him, that the whole of Harrenhal did not hear her scream his name as he plundered inside of her. But even with every kiss and duel between their tongues, it felt near impossible to be quiet with every one of his thrusts inside of her. Her nails dug into his back, scratching across him with every thrust. Ned. Oh. You're so big. Oh, Ned, she screamed, insatiably hungry for more. Oh, Ashura. I love you, he moaned. Hearing him say those words with how he thrusted filled her made her climax sooner than she had expected. Ned. Ned. Ned, she said, panting as she felt her own wet seed on Ned. But Ned was insatiable. He kept thrusting inside of her. Ashura moaned with the more thrusts he made inside her. More, Ned. More. Oh, my sweet Ned. Yes. Ash. Ashura, he moaned. Every time that he said her name, she could feel yet another climax approach. She panted with each thrust inside of her. It seemed to her that she was the novice, and he was as experienced as his brother and his foster brother. Ashura. This time, she heard the urgency in his voice. And she felt herself climax, just as he climaxed. Ashura panted, his member still buried deep inside of her. She felt his own seed fill all the way inside of her. Oh, Ned, she said. In contrast to how powerful his member was, how much stamina he had and how fast of a learner he was, he gently hugged her and kissed her, fondling her breasts and her ass as he did so. Ashura eagerly kissed him. Ash, he gently whispered. With how he kissed her and touched her, it was as though he refused to let go of her. As though he feared that she was but a dream or a figment of his imagination. And that he was scared to let her go. She kissed him hard on the lips. Ned. That felt wonderful, didn't it? She asked with a smile. He sighed as they faced each other lying down in bed. But in doing so, Ashura moaned with annoyance when Ned pulled out of her. She felt his seed and her own slowly leak out of her. Gods, there's so much. It was perfect. You are perfect, Ash, he whispered as he stroked her face. Her face which now blushed with how he treated her. All other men who had ever shown interest in her had only done so for her beauty and her body. And others treated her no better than a common whore. But Ned treated her as though she was the most precious thing in the world. As though he didn't truly deserve her. But it only made Ashura love him even more. You sell yourself too short, Ned, my love. We have each other. And we will always have each other, no matter what, she said, staring longingly into his soft grey eyes. I could stare into those eyes like this forever. Just to be here with Ned. And to look in those eyes. Ash. Yes, she asked, finally catching her breath after the best time in bed she had ever had in her life. Made better by the fact that it was shared with the man she loved. Marry me. What? Truly? Ashura couldn't quite believe what he had just said. Staring into his eyes, she felt tears in her eyes. Truly, Ned, she asked. He said worriedly, as though concerned she would say no. I know I have no riches nor lands nor holdings. But I know that I love you so much. And I would do anything for you. I don't know what life we will share, but it is a life I would never regret if it was shared with you. Ashura felt herself breathless, just when she had caught her breath again. Ned. Yes. Yes, I will marry you, she said before kissing him hard on his lips. They continued the kiss, until Ashura felt his member harden again. Gods, Ned. You can't get enough of me, can you? Even after all of that, you still are not yet satisfied with my body. But I intend to correct that, even if it takes all night. Notes. I know that Ned is honorable to a fault as he was raised to be by John Arryn, but he loves Ashura Dane dearly and she loves him. And Barristan Selmy did recall from Harrenhal that she was dishonored in Harrenhal during the tourney. Chapter 31, The Morning After. Summary. Ned and Ashura return to their families and friends respectively. How quickly will they latch on to their nighttime activities? Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Lyanna 4. Lyanna was glad that she was wrong about Robert. As they held hands whilst walking from the Stormlands encampment and back to the northern encampment, she smiled at holding hands with Robert. Passing by Robert's friends, his cousin Eamon Estermont, Ballion Morrigan, Ralph Buckler and Harmon Donderion. Gillian Swan, said Lord Robert. Lady Baratheon with a grin. Lyanna blushed at hearing that. But she felt a comfort in holding his hand. When once she stubbornly clung on to the belief that people couldn't change their ways, she was certain that Robert was not the man she once believed he was. In a way, she was glad that Brandon and Neddy were right about him. Robert. Yes, my Lady Lyanna, he asked with a smile. I wanted to say thank you. Gods, I cannot believe I am saying this. Before coming here, I thought him nothing but a whoring drunk. But he is a good man. Whatever for? He asked, the surprise was evident in his voice. For standing up for me and for Howland. And defeating those so-called knights and letting the world know what squires they have in their service. Had it not been for you, I might have taken it upon myself to bear some sense into them. At that, he let out a boom of laughter. Lyanna pouted at him, laughing at her. Why does he laugh at me? He saw me beat that free coward. Why do you laugh? I am being serious, she insisted in the strongest possible terms. He calmed slightly before he spake. No, I know, Lyanna. And I believe you. I have no doubt that you would have torn them to pieces like a hungry wolf. I was doing them a service merely by not letting you get to them, he replied. At that Lyanna laughed with him. But then she stopped. She stopped when she spotted Neddy. Neddy was walking back to the northern encampment, as though he had just returned from Harrenhal. He left for Harrenhal last night. Is that Ned? Where has he been? Wondered Lionel. Robert turned around. Seeing him, he grinned. Did he leave last night for Harrenhal and not come back? He asked. Oh, I can think one very good reason as to why, he said. Surely not. Neddy is honorable to a fault, she said. Perhaps. And yet, Ashura is a very beautiful Dornish woman, he replied. Robert turned to Lionel. They walked together to the Stark Pavilion, where already Brandon and Benjen were sat inside with Brandon's friends Willam, Mark and Jeffrey. Neddy, Lionel could see, was bedraggled and unkempt as he was before he met Ashura, and yet he looked happier. Until he saw Brandon and his friends. Well now, Ned. You look like a triumphant hero returned from ending the long night, boomed Brandon, a mischievous grin on his face, whilst Benjen and his friends were chuckling. I do not know what you mean, said Neddy with a raised brow. Well, you went to Harrenhal last night to go out and ride with Ashura, did you not? Asked Brandon, who was adding an emphasis on the word ride for dramatic effect, much to the amusement of his friends, and Robert. I did, Neddy replied, his face red with blushing. He looks so adorable when he blushes. Brandon, Lionel said, trying to stop him. But Brandon ignored her, clearly having too much fun as he teased Neddy. And only now, you return. From what was supposed to be only an hour or so of riding around Harrenhal's lands. What conclusion am I supposed to draw from that? Did you get drunk last night in Harrenhal? Brandon walked to Neddy, dramatically sniffing at him. I smell no wine, beer or mead. But I do smell something. Wait, what's that? He wondered as he sniffed again. A woman's perfume. Do you mean to tell us you spent the night in a brothel? Asked Brandon, with a scandalous tone. I did not. I would never do that to Ashura. I spent the night in her. Neddy stopped when he realized what he had just done. Lionel couldn't believe it. Gods. Aha. Ned Stark. Gods, you're a man now. Had your first woman in bed? Brandon boomed with a wide grin and a laugh, whilst Willam, Mark, Jeffrey and Robert all laughed and patted Neddy on the back. Neddy, is it true? Lionel asked. Neddy blushed as he nodded. I told her that I love her, and she told me that she loves me. After we. Neddy did not say it. So, Brandon said it for him. Fucked. His friends all chuckled whilst Neddy blushed again before continuing. Afterwards, I proposed to her, and she said yes. Lionel beamed before hugging him. Well done, Neddy, she said. Well done, Ned. Now you'll just have to write to father and to her own family, said Brandon. Elia v. It's most unlike Ash to be late for breakfast, said Miria. What was she doing last night? Asked Elia. She said that she was going horse riding with Ned, replied Lara. At that, Elia's eyes opened wide. No, she couldn't have done. Could she? And Ned wondered, Miria, thinking the same thing. No. Ned is far too honorable and innocent to do that, said Lara. True. And yet, Ash told me that she loves him. And he clearly loves her. And if I know Ash, once she's got her mind set on something, she won't let go, said Elia. She seduced him. She must have done. Or at least must have tried to do that. Ned might have kept a hold of his honor, unlike his older brother and his friends, Robert Baratheon, Jeffrey Mallister and Elbert Arryn. But when Ash finally walked to their table, Elia gestured to Miria and Lara. The three shared a mischievous grin as Ash sat beside Elia with a beaming smile, as though nothing was at all wrong. Only to be greeted by the three of them as they crossed their arms and fixed her with a judging look. What is this? Asked Ash. Well, you are late for breakfast. And you look particularly bedraggled and unkempt this morning, said Elia. Yes, Ash. In fact, already I can see a few red marks in your neck, which you are badly trying to hide, and your lips are swollen, Miria pointed out. Yes, and what is that smell? Lara asked before dramatically sniffing the air around Ash. Ash blushed as she tried to cover the red marks on her neck with the collar of her dress. What do you smell, Lara? Asked Elia with a scandalized smirk. I smell sweat. It appears someone hasn't had a bath this morning after riding. What was it? Horses. Or was it something other than horses, she asked with a grin. Again, Ash blushed whilst trying to suppress a grin. Wait, I know that smell. That's the smell of a man. And a man's seed. Or is it a wolf's? Fine, yes. You win, Ash admitted. Elia, Lara and Miria burst into a fit of giggles whilst Ash drank from a cup of water. Do you need plenty of water after last night, Ash? Asked Miria. Shut up, Ash replied with a blush. Or, you're blushing like you did when you first kissed in the water gardens, Lara teased. So she is, Elia thought with a smirk. So, what was it like, Ash? Asked Elia. Ash beamed dreamily at the question. It was perfect. It was just so wonderful, she replied. Was it? Asked Miria. Yes. It took a little convincing on his part, but I convinced him. And he did not disappoint in the slightest, Ash said with pride. Did not disappoint. Do elaborate, eagerly said Lara. For a quiet and shy wolf, he is very big and is a very fast learner, Ash admitted with a grin. They all giggled at her words. And then he proposed to me. He proposed to you? Elia asked with surprise. And I said yes. Unable to contain herself, Elia reached over and pulled Ash into a hug. That's wonderful, Ash. So wonderful, she said. Ash looked unable to contain herself excitement whilst Lara and Miria all hugged her and congratulated her. Have you written to your father? Asked Elia. At the mention of her foul father, Ash's smile dampened into a deep frown. No. Ned has written to his own father. But we decided this morning to have our wedding here, she said. Here? Asked Miria. Yes, at the Harrenhal Godswood, said Ash. You both decided that? Asked Lara. We did, said Ash. A wedding of the old gods? Asked Elia. That doesn't matter to me. What matters to me is Ned, Ash said with conviction. Well, as long as we are allowed to come, said Miria. Of course. I would never want to be wed without my dearest friends in attendance, said Ash. Now, what happens today in the tourney? Asked Ash. The last match of the melee. The bookmaker's favorite is Bronze Yoan Royce of Runestone, said Miria. And what of the jousting? Who is left? Ash wondered. Only Roriger, Baylor Hightower, and Brandon Stark. Notes. Didn't take them long to figure it out. But Lyanna is now seeing how wrong she was about Robert and sees the good in him. Chapter 32, The Melee Match. Summary. The penultimate match of the tourney, the finale of the melee. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Elbereth 4. Elbereth sat with Ned, Robert, Kyle, Morton, Donal, Jeffrey and Brandon in the audience, watching as the combatants of the melee began to take position. There's Yoan, said Kyle, recognizing his brother. It wasn't long before Elbereth could see the young lord of Runestone amongst their number. Elbereth nodded when he saw him, smiling proudly at perhaps the best and strongest fighter in the Vale. The wielder of the Royce greatsword, Lamentation. And the man who wore a fabled bronze plate armor, with ancient runes of the first men inscribed on it to protect the wearer from harm. He looks like a knight ready for war, Robert commented with a clap as the tourney master called for silence across the arena. My king. My prince. My princess. My lords and ladies. All honored guests. We come the end of the melee in my Lord Went's great tourney. This shall indeed be a spectacle, the likes of which have not been seen in the Seven Kingdoms for many years. Elbereth joined the applause before he called for silence once again. Assembled before us today are many a great knight and lord from across the Seven Kingdoms, Sir Desmond of House Redwine, Sir Garth of House Hightower, Sir Quinton of House Banefort, Sir Martin of House Castle, Sir Aaron of House Santager, Sir Ballion of House Moraigen, Sir Eamon of House Estermont, Sir Umriel of House Celtigar, Sir Quintin of House Corgyle, Sir Miles of House Manwadi, Sir Aaron of House Wentwater, Sir Lynn of House Corbray, Sir Axel of House Florent, Sir Michael of House Caswell, Sir Lorenz of House Meadows, Sir Walder of House Free, Lord Jorah of House Mormont, Sir John O's of House Bracken, Lord Ricard of House Carstark and Lord Yoan of House Royce. Elbereth clapped when he heard the name of Yoan. He cheered when he saw him lift his great sword for all to see as his name was announced. Should we ever fight a war in our lifetimes, Yone would emerge from said war as one of the greatest warriors and perhaps the most legendary knight of the Vale. What man could look upon him and doubt such a thing? All combatants bowed to King Aes, as was expected. "Take position," commanded the tourney master after the king nodded his consent. The combatants all took positions. Elbereth smiled when he saw Yone hold up his great sword with one hand and his shield in the other. "I cannot imagine any of those other knights or lords emerging victorious. Yone is too great a knight to be defeated in a match such as this." The buglers played a grand note. And the combatants began the battle. Elbereth focused on Yone, who quickly struck down Axel Florent with a parry to Florent's sword thrust and then a powerful strike across his helm and cuirass with his great sword. Next, he turned to Quentin Bainfort. The heir to Bainfort was renowned for choosing to fight on foot rather than on horseback, thinking it would harden him into a better fighter than relying on being horseback. His skill with a great sword and the dark mystery that surrounded his black hood on his helm, like his house's sigil, added to the dread that followed in his wake. Bainfort thrust at Yone. Yone blocked the thrust with his sword and swung his shield at him. Bainfort dodged the shield's blow and powerfully struck down on the shield twice. As the shield fell from his grasp, Yone took the opening and swung powerfully at Bainfort's breastplate. The heir to Bainfort gasped at the blow to his cuirass. And Yone followed with 2 additional blows, first to his breastplate and then to his helm, knocking him down to the ground. Elbereth clapped at Yone's victory as the number of opponents stood before him grew smaller and smaller. Lord Ricard Carstark made swift work of the younger brother of Alistair Florent before he turned to Yone. The two began to duel as Lord Jorah Mormont fell to Garth Hightower and was followed soon after by Desmond Redwyne and Aemon Estermont. Elbereth clapped with pride as Yone swung his enormous greatsword, landing a hit on the Lord of Carhold. There was once a time when Yone would fight with a large Morning Star mace in tourneys and in the skirmishes, he had fought against hill tribesmen and Sisterman sea raiders. But ever since the Pentoshi treasure hunter, Nikolos Volinar, had recovered the fabled and lost Valyrian steel greatsword of House Royce, Lamentation, from the ruined dragon pit in King's Landing, Yone had decided to fight with it instead, as the ruling Lord of Runestone, Lord of House Royce and wielder of this sword. Both of his gnarled hands are like a pair of maces anyway, thought Elbereth as Yone turned from the defeated Lord of Carhold and swiftly swung at his second-last opponent, Umril Celtigar. The swing disarmed Celtigar of his shield. He promptly thrusted at Yone. Only for Yone to strike at his helm with his fist. The blow had battered a hole in Celtigar's helm. Elbereth clapped as he watched Yone swing his great sword down. The Celtigar knight, 12 years his senior, fell to Yone's sword, just as he faced Garth Hightower defeat Desmond Redwyne. Garth Hightower advanced on Yone with sword and shield, swinging both swiftly at Yone. Yone blocked each blow before he kicked the second son of Lytton Hightower back. Garth Greysteel thrusted his sword at Yone's helm, only for him to swing his great sword across and disarm the second son of the Lord of Old Town. Yone roared as he jumped up and smashed his great sword down on Sir Garth's helm, splitting it open. But Elbereth was glad to see no serious amount of blood. But then Yone turned to him once again before he struck him down with his great sword. Elbereth and his friends all stood and clapped and cheered for Yone as he lifted high his great sword and his helm whilst the buglers played a final tune. All clapped and cheered for the exhausted Lord of Runestone as he panted and pierced his great sword into the trampled grounds. "My king, my prince and princess, my lords and ladies, the victor of the melee is Lord Yone of House Royce," announced the tourney master. All clapped and cheered again as Yone smiled to the audience and then bowed to the king, sat in the royal box. What a match! And what a way to end the tourney! With one of our group emerging triumphant. Notes: Bronze Yone Royce showing off his sword skills for all the world to see. Will the finale of the jousting be just as exciting? Chapter 33, the Grand Finale. Summary. Baelor vs Roriger, how will it go? Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Baelor v. Now Baelor climbed atop of Brightwind's saddle. He inhaled and exhaled as he rode gently to the starting position on the tourney lists. I've made it this far. To the grand finale of the tourney. And for the first time, not for the prize purse or for the glorious prestige, he thought as he glanced up at the royal box. Gods, she is so beautiful. Why did the gods have to be so cruel to me? And make Elia Martell the only woman in the world whom I could ever love? Rhaegar Targaryen should know just how fortunate he is to have such a wonderful woman as his wife and one day, his queen. She deserves only the best that the world has to offer. Baelor grimaced when he looked down at his opponent. Crown Prince Rhaegar sat on his beautifully armored horse. Both horse and rider wore black armor decorated with red rubies in the shape of three-headed Targaryen dragons. He wore a helm shaped like a dragon's head, and held up a lance with a lance shaft shaped like a dragon's tail. But on another glance at the Crown Prince, Baelor's eyes caught sight of something out of place amongst the Crown Prince's armor. He blinked when he saw a lady's favor tucked under his bracer. Even from where he was sat, Baelor could see the orange coloring and the faint outline of a sun-pierced spear. Does he have to stuff it in my face? Baelor lifted his visor briefly and wiped his eyes. Keep it together, Baelor, he said inwardly. He tried to fight the tears that stained his eyes and the foul bile which left a bitter taste in his mouth. Baelor inhaled and exhaled as he looked to the royal box once again. Brother. Are you all right? Baelor turned to Gunthor, who looked up at him with concern. All is well, Gunthor. Fear not, he said with a pained smile before he lowered his visor. Brightwind neighed slightly. Baelor stroked his neck. It's all right, Brightwind. I'm all right, he whispered. I will be once this is all over. My king. My princess. My lords and ladies. We come now to the ultimate and final match of my Lord Went's grand and glorious tourney. Jousting now is Prince Rhaegar of House Targaryen, Crown Prince of Dragonstone. Jousting against him is Sir Baelor of House Hightower, heir to Old Town. Baelor felt a slight encouragement when he saw how Elia clapped in the royal box at when he said his name. Though he saw her clap for her husband, he felt his heart strengthen at seeing her clap at the sound of his name. I will win this for you, Elia. For you and only you. As the crowds applauded and cheered, mostly for the Crown Prince, Baelor inhaled and exhaled deeply. Both bowed to the royal box and to the king. The king nodded and waved his hand to the tourney master. Prince Rhaegar. Stand ye ready. The Crown Prince raised his lance up high. Then he turned to Baelor. Sir Baelor. Stand ye ready. Baelor lifted his lance up. I'm ready. The buglers played a long and glorious tune before the crowds all clapped and cheered to see both Baelor and the Crown Prince ride. Baelor had been studying the Crown Prince and how he rode. He was undoubtedly a skilled rider. But his skill was not as great as he had been led to believe. Baelor suspected that his status as Crown Prince added to his victories. He was certain that his previous opponents had allowed themselves to be beaten by him not to anger House Targaryen and the future king. But Baelor held no such feelings towards the Crown Prince. Not when victory was in sight. Baelor waited until he was sure the time was right. And then he swung his shield across at Prince Rhaegar's lance. The lance shaft was knocked off target by only a foot. Whilst Baelor's lance struck true. Baelor never took his eyes off his target as his lance struck at his breastplate, just a few inches from his pauldron. Baelor continued to ride ahead until he reached the opposite end of the tourney list. He turned around upon hearing groans and shrieks from the audience. He grinned when he saw the Crown Prince lying on the ground. Baelor climbed down from his horse still, as was expected, and ran towards him. But halfway before he could reach the Crown Prince, he began to push himself up. Baelor felt another grin when he saw the Crown Prince's armor dented from the blow of his lance. He also saw Elia's favor, lying on the ground. He reached down to pick it up. As much as he wanted to take it for himself, he knew it was not his by right. And whilst he wanted nothing more than to fulfill his heart's desire for whatever connection he could have to Elia, he knew he could not in front of the hundreds and thousands of attendants. And so, he continued walking to the Crown Prince. My prince, he said angrily. He was glad that his helm obscured his face, so he did not see how he furiously glared at him. The Crown Prince panted as he stood up, whilst the crowds began to cheer for him. Baelor offered Elia's favor to him. I believe this is yours, my prince, he said. Rhaegar turned to him. He nodded when he saw it. And with barely a glance at it, he snatched it from his hands. My thanks, sir, he replied. What in the seven hells? Elia Martell is perhaps the most wonderful woman in the world. A woman who deserves the best of everything. And this is what you think of her and what she feels for you. If she had given me that lady's favor, I would treasure it and hold it close to my heart. You insufferable prick. Baylor bowed his head to the king whilst the tourney master spoke. And the victor of this tourney, my king, my princess, my lords and ladies, is Sir Baylor of House Hightower. Baylor smiled when he saw how Garth and Lioness all clapped for him. But he felt his heart beat fast at seeing Elia beam and clap for him. He walked back to Brightwind and rode back to his place in the tourney lists, where he removed his helm. Gunthor took the helm, and he passed him the last lance. It was a ceremonial one and a beautifully decorated one. Decorated with the sigil of House Hightower and beautifully painted. It was only for once the jousting was won and he was to crown his Queen of Love and Beauty. Baylor rode to the center of the tourney lists. He lowered his lance for the tourney master, who held the blue floral crown in his hands. The tourney master gently placed the crown on his lance. And Baylor glanced around. He smiled when he saw Lioness smiling as though expecting to receive a crown. However, he also spotted many young ladies around the audience. All smiling, waving or jutting themselves out to try and make themselves seen. But Baylor's eyes were on only one. The one woman whom he couldn't have, and yet his heart yearned for. He rode towards the royal box and lowered his lance. Baylor inhaled deeply as he watched the crown of blue roses fall from his lance and onto the lap of the heavenly beautiful Elia Martell. For you, Princess Elia, for amongst those gathered today, there are none as fair, as beautiful or as magnanimous than you, he said with as best a smile as he could for the love of his life. Notes. Personally, I think that Elia deserves a turn where she is crowned Queen of Love and Beauty, and Roriger is the one whom is humiliated. But how will that play into the plots? Chapter 34, Jealousy and Rage. Summary. Roriger is embarrassed and humiliated in front of the realm. And Aes is loving it all. Notes. See the end of the chapter for notes. Chapter text. Roriger 4. Roriger wanted nothing more than to rage at the world. For all that had happened this very day. The signal to begin Father's removal from the Iron Throne. Was to be his crowning of Elia as his Queen of Love and Beauty. And yet, he had been unhorsed. He, the greatest jouster and horseman in the Seven Kingdoms. He had been defeated by Baylor Hightower, a man more famous for his smile and for breaking wind in the presence of a suitor than his skills at horsemanship and with a lance. But then, he dared to add insult to injury. When he dared to crown her. He crowned Elia as his Queen of Love and Beauty. By doing so, he mocked Roriger. He, the last dragon. And future king of the Seven Kingdoms. Roriger punched and pounded the walls of his chambers in fury befitting a dragon as he resisted the urge to scream his fury from the windows and let all of Harrenhal and all those gathered for the tourney to hear his anger. How dare he do such a thing? How dare he mock his future king? And mock House Targaryen? That arrogant Hightower bastard. Roriger kicked aside his stool in his chambers before grunting in annoyance as he stared out at the landscape from the window of his bedchambers. And Roriger saw the banners of the proud House Hightower from the Reach encampment. Like a bull hot with anger, he wanted nothing more than to charge. Until he heard an urgent knocking on the door behind him. He had commanded Arthur and Oswell to not knock unless it was important. What in the seven hells could this be about? When I want nothing more than to burn Baylor Hightower. Roriger gently he heard from outside. It was Arthur. What? Roriger snapped in anger. The king summons you. Now. Those 5 words filled Roriger's mouth with a foul-tasting vitriol and threatened to make him retch. All feelings he felt towards Baylor Hightower were quickly dispelled as he feared why he had been summoned. Has father discovered what we have been doing? He took a deep breath as he straightened his sleeves, smoothed his collar and smartened his doublet and finally wiped the sweat from his brow, sweated in anger rather than heat. Roriger finally left his bedchambers, his heart pounding with fear as he thought of facing father. But as he left his bedchambers, he remembered something important. What Oswell said when Harlon Greyjoy was summoned by father. Oswell said of how both he and Quayan Greyjoy were both anxious until father showed his cordial side as he met him and discussed what both he and the old Kraken wanted for the Iron Islands. It could be nothing. He must not know anything vital. It may be that he just wants to taunt me and mock me. For a supposedly madman, father was oddly astute when doing his utmost to make Roriger's own life miserable. Roriger arrived in a large chamber that had been converted into a solar for visiting guests in Kingspire Tower. And yet this guest solar was larger than Roriger's bedchambers in the Red Keep and the Stone Drum and his solar in the Stone Drum combined. Father was sat at a desk, and with Elia sat on the other side. Elia's belly was heavy with child now. The signs were clear. And Roriger felt a warmth from seeing her gestation, making him briefly forget about what father may have summoned him for. She carries Egon, the prince that was promised. And soon after, she will carry our Visenya. The dragon must have 3 heads. And